Hey everyone, if you were paying attention during the end credits of James Gunn's Superman movie, you might have noticed that the special thanks section, which included a number of comic book creators, started alphabetically with none other than writer Chuck Austen. Well, funny enough, Mike Sangregorio and I had recently recorded an epic 2+ hour discussion of Chuck Austen's Superman work, including the Superman METROPOLIS maxiseries starring Jimmy Olsen, as well as Chuck Austen's year-long run on Action Comics, which, among other controversial plot points, resurrected the decades-old love triangle among Superman, Lois, and Lana. Mike and I had a great time comparing notes and disagreeing very strongly. I think you'll be surprised at some of the hot takes that Mike shares in this episode, but it was a lot of fun. We really got into it, and I was planning to release this Chuck Austen episode following the movie anyway, and then it ended up being extremely serendipitous that we saw Chuck thanked in the credits of the movie. Now, if you've already heard the episode I did with Mike where we talked about the works that influenced James Gunn, you'll know that we really had a hard time pinpointing what, if any, direct influences James Gunn drew from Chuck Austen's work. And I'm not saying Mike and I are experts, but we very recently spent a lot of time going through this man's comic book work. So I feel like if there was something really specific, it probably would have jumped out at us. In any event, this is a perfect time to drop our episode on Chuck Austen's Superman work. I really hope you enjoy. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. Aw Yeah Comics celebrates everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, home to our pal, Sweet Sweet Bernie. If you have children and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow them on social media. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. We love digging into epic comic book runs, but what about the art of the single issue? Single Bound is a new podcast series hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics. And if the title also makes you think of Superman, you're not alone, as the Man of Steel is Logan's favorite character and a regular topic of discussion on Single Bound. Listen and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and follow the show on Instagram at Single Bound Podcast. My love of the TV series Smallville is well documented, and there's one rewatch podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring great insight, passion, and humor to each and every episode. And the podcast continues with more great Smallville and Superman talk now that their series rewatch has concluded. Listen wherever you get podcasts, and keep an eye out for the other shows under the Always Hold On To banner, including Arrow, Star Wars, and more. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss the Superman works of writer Chuck Austen, and yes, you heard that right, is returning guest Mike Sangregorio. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We've been promising/threatening this for years, and the time has finally come. How you feeling?
Very excited. I can't believe you hadn't done it already.
That's true. Well, there are reasons, and we'll get into all of that. You and I were about the same age. Did you watch Boy Meets World growing up?
No, sorry.
Oh, that's a shame, but that's okay. So there's an episode in season 6 where Corey thinks that something's going on between Topanga, his girlfriend, and Sean, his best friend. And he finds them in the student union. They'd fallen asleep on the couch under a blanket. And he pulls off the blanket and he finds Sean in his t-shirt and boxers. And he says what I would argue is one of the most famous lines of the series, "Underpants." And I bring this up because I had a similar reaction when in Chuck Austen's Action Comics, Lois Lane finds a pair of Lana Lang's panties mixed in with her clothing.
Yeah, it does.
Now, we're going to get into all of this, but let me ask you, was it an innocent mistake that this one delicate article of clothing got mixed in with Lois's stuff? Or was this purposely planted by Lana to sow discord in the marriage?
Oh, I thought it was on purpose.
Yes.
Yeah, without a doubt. It didn't even occur to me that it was an accident.
I was just trying to play devil's advocate and give her a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, but I agree with you. How does that play for you?
Oh, I loved it because, I never really got into the Kristen Krewick version. And I don't think I've read many comics post-crisis that featured the character. So I thought this was great. Like, you're giving her that Silver Age fire that I know she has, but I've never been able to see for myself before. So I thought it was great. It's like, let Lois really have to defend why she is the one. And Lana's perfect because Lana's like, no, I've known him. I've been there. I know the real him. You get this weird, like, multiple personality guy you got to deal with. I know him. I was there. So I loved it. I wish it had gone on longer.
But it didn't feel like way over the line for her to insert herself in their marriage in that way.
It felt really over the line. But this is what I'm always saying. It's like, I don't like that, like, boring, mundane, we're married and we're happy and it's like, this is the, what did Stan Lee call it? The perpetual, like, second act. Like, I love, it's like a soap opera, right? Like, I love the ex-girlfriend shows up. She's got a kid named Clark. Her vice president ex-husband is floating out there somewhere and she's going to break up this marriage and she doesn't care that he's super. I was like, yeah, this is exactly what I want. I want drama.
Okay. So this is why you're here. And people might be shocked or pleasantly surprised to know that for this episode, we found somebody to join me here who's actually going to speak up in defense of Chuck Austen's work. One of the most notorious writers in comics on one of the most maligned Superman runs ever, I would say. But you've found a lot seemingly to enjoy. And I will just say, for the record, while I do think there are interesting ideas about Lana that are explored, I'll give you that. I powerfully disagree about
awesome.
about whether or not this was appropriate for the story to explore in the way that it did.
Sure.
But this will be great fodder for discussion. I mean, like I said, we've been talking about doing this for years. And I've already covered the runs that were running concurrently to this. So you had Brian Azzarello and Jim Lee on Superman doing For Tomorrow, and you had Greg Rucka on Adventures of Superman. And we did episodes on those years ago.
Yeah.
But I always held off on this because I just sort of felt like, what am I going to be able to say about this other than this is terrible? Not that I would even say it or say it in that way, but I felt like if I'm just going to come on and bag on this for an hour and a half, like what's the point? I'm not really contributing anything.
Yeah.
But look, time passes and it was an itch that I couldn't scratch. The fact that you had the reaction to the run that you did kind of lit my fire a little bit because I felt like, okay, this will make it interesting. And the other thing too is I just got to the point, we've been doing this long enough, where it's like I trust in this process that we have developed here, myself and guests like yourself over all of these years, where I know no matter what we're talking about, we're going to do it justice. We're going to read and think and talk about it thoughtfully. We find what redeeming value there is for it, and we just unpack it. And as we've gotten closer to this, I've gotten like really excited to do it. So, I think this will be a lot of fun. I got to share what some of our audience members, our great patrons, had to say about the fact that we were doing this.
Very good.
And man, we're just going to have a field day with this because not only do we have the stories themselves to talk about, but there's the man himself and the moment in comics that he had in the early to mid aughts and everything that went on behind the scenes with this. There's a lot to this. But when I put the call out to our Daily Planet bullpen patrons, that's our $1 a month tier or $10 for the year. And these folks get first look at what we're going to be recording and they have the opportunity to submit a comment or question. I really appreciate it. So Rick said, as someone who just reread this run not long ago, I just want to know who hurt you guys and why don't you like fun? Rick, don't worry. We're going to have loads of fun here. Jan similarly says, my only question is, what is going on in your life that you're subjecting yourself to intense psychological torture by reading this run? Are you okay? There's more. Logan says, I always try to read whatever you're going to cover ahead of time, but this one had me feeling like Kylo Ren. I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it. Related, sounds like you were right. If he's making you do this, Sangregorio is your Lex Luthor. Because that was in one of our recent episodes. Was it our 200th? It must have been, where he asked of our follically challenged guests, which one is my Lex Luthor? And he suggested the three choices were you, Bernie, and DeVoe. And no hesitation. Like, no, it's my, but not in an antagonistic way. I say that with love, maybe because I'm going back to the Smallville of For the record, Mike is not making me do this. If anything, I kind of made him do it, but he did it happily. So it all worked out. And then Chris asks a question that kind of tees up what I was getting at about the larger picture here. Chris says, I've never read this, but I was there for Chuck Austen's run on X-Men.
Hell yeah.
So many crazy and problematic choices. Was it the absolute worst X-Men run ever? Quite possibly. Very curious to hear your discussion. So before we get to Superman, I do think this is important to set the stage, because for anyone listening to this who wasn't old enough to be reading comics at the time, or just got into comics more recently, or, we have people who don't really read the comics, but they watch the TV shows and the movies, and they might be listening to this out of curiosity. I cannot stress the moment that Chuck Austen had in the early to mid aughts at both Marvel and DC, especially Marvel.
Yeah.
This man was everywhere. I mean, you probably followed more of his work than I did, especially on the X-Men front. I mean, can you just speak to that about just
absolutely
what was going on with him at the time?
Yeah. So this was, Marvel in the early 2000s, just to paint a very quick picture, they declared bankruptcy in 1996. And then a few years later, the Marvel Knights subline launches. And that's pretty much the first time of renewal. Joe Quesada becomes editor-in-chief. There's a lot of movement up and down the chain of command. And basically they were trying new things. And my rough understanding, I've never met the man, is that I guess he had been in comics. He drew an issue of Miracle Man, among other things. He left, he went to TV, he came back, and he was on someone's good side, so he got handed the keys to the kingdom. Off the top of my head, I know he wrote X-Men for an extended period of time, which I bought every issue as it hit the stands because I was already buying the book. He wrote the Avengers for a while, picking up after very popular runs of, I think it was Jeff Johns. He followed him. So again, like real good pedigree there. And then he wrote a book called U.S. War Machine. So he really liked the new Max line. That was, as far as I know, was created just because Garth Ennis was like, I need the training wheels taken off here, guys, if you really want me to deliver you A-level work. And he did that, which was an out of continuity story where, well, a lot of questionable things happen, but basically it's the character of War Machine fighting Dr. Doom is the simplest way to put it. And then he did a ton of miscellaneous work. The period we're talking about is right at the beginning of the War on Terror. He did a lot of those like 9/11 first responder books, which I have not read, so I don't know if they're good or not. And then he did a book called The Eternal, which was a take on Jack Kirby's Eternals from that recent movie. But what if they were Max? What if they were NC-17? So
okay. Did you mention Captain America? I know he did a run on that too.
Oh, yeah. I always forget about that because he didn't start it.
Right.
He picked it up after the other gentleman.
And on the art side, he also drew the first, I think, 8 issues of that Marvel Knights Elektra series.
Oh, I forgot about
as well.
That.
So like really this, and we're talking about a relatively concentrated period of time. So a lot of Chuck Austen in a
U.S. War Machine came out per week, and I think he drew it on the computer too. So
okay.
It was black and white, but it was a lot of content.
You mentioned The Call of Duty. That was, I think, a trio of miniseries. He wrote 2 of them. And this was right after 9/11. And I actually, believe it or not, I read that.
Oh, okay.
To me, it was reminiscent of the NBC television show Third Watch,
okay,
which I enjoyed a lot back in the day.
What is that about?
Firefighters, paramedics, police officers in New York City who work the 3 to 11 shift.
Oh, okay.
And it ran for like 6 seasons. It was a great show. But I did not get a lot out of the comic book miniseries, but because it ended up being more about the paranormal. Whereas I just really wanted kind of like day-to-day on the ground, real world type stories.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about how much he was doing, but to Chris's point, Chuck Austen elicited quite a strong and vocal reaction from fans.
Yeah, he did.
And this was early-ish days of online forums, message boards, all that stuff. Not social media to the extent that we have now, but certainly the message boards, yeah?
Yeah, no, I was there, man. It was crazy because it was like, you know, if a comic is okay, you can complain about it and you can move on. But if a comic pushes all your buttons the way every story he did, then people are going to find a way to complain about it. And suddenly we had this new method where you could complain about it online behind a screen name. No one knew who you were. And then every once in a while, one of these guys would pop up and be like, I wrote that. I remember getting into a quote unquote fight with like Fabian Nicieza. It's like, I look back at this. It's like, it's wild. The contact we used to have with these people. And yeah, it was really the Wild West. I remember when the Draco came out and
right. Because the idea, not that this is an X-Men podcast, it is not, nor will it ever be. That's so far out of my wheelhouse. But my understanding is the hook of that story was the reveal that Nightcrawler was actually the son of a demon.
Well, not a demon in the sense that that the creature was magic, but the sense that he was a mutant who it was indicated that he may have inspired the legend of the demons. So this is one of the reasons that and by the way, just to cite my own resume here, this isn't the first time I've defended Chuck Austen. Like, you can ask anyone who knows me, I like taking the other side of stuff just because I like hearing my own voice. But in this case, I actually do mean it. I enjoyed those stories. I didn't drop it. Even when it got really like quote unquote bad with the Husk and Archangel stuff. It's like, you're trying to do something. And if I like any of it, I'm more likely to stick with it than just another issue where I can't tell you what happened after I stopped reading it. And that's never been the case with a Chuck Austen comic.
All right. Hey, fair. And I'm sure other fans are out there, whether or not they'll
I doubt it.
speak up and identify themselves.
I've never met one at San Diego, New York, or any con in between. I've never, ever met someone else who liked this stuff. So
throughout all of that Marvel work, for the most part, I mean, I know I read some of his stuff at the time because I was reading that Marvel Knights Cap book, at least. That's probably about it, I would say. But for the most part, as a pretty casual Marvel fan, I was able to observe Chuck Austen more as like a bystander. Right? I'm like, man, people really don't like this guy.
Yeah.
But then he comes over, here. Now, when we talk about the Superman works of Chuck Austen, the Action Comics run is the centerpiece. I was going to say highlight, but I don't know if that's, that's the appropriate choice of word. But that's the centerpiece. However, there's more to it. So he did a couple of fill-ins on the super titles in 2002. He did Man of Steel 129 in August 2002, and then Superman 188 in November of that same year. From 2003 to 2004, he did the Superman Metropolis maxi-series, a 12-issue story starring Jimmy Olsen and dealing with the B-13 tech. And we talked about the first issue of that when we did our Jimmy Olsen survey, but now we've both gone through, we've reread the entire thing. And then, of course, this now infamous Action Comics run. He did backup stories to set the stage for it in 812 and 813, but officially in April 2004, his run began with issue 814. And more or less, the run concluded with issue 825. And I say more or less because he was fired off of the book and did not actually write the last two issues. They were written by a mystery person who used the pseudonym J.D. Finn. Do you have any thoughts, theories on that?
It is J.D. Salinger, author of Catcher in the Rye, and it is Huckleberry Finn.
Yes. Well, one of the other things I had heard was that it sounds like Jaded Fan, but I like your version. But no, I meant more, do you have any theories as to who actually wrote those issues?
Oh, it had to be Berganza. Had to be.
Okay. I could save this for later, but it's interesting. We'll talk about it now. So Austen has done interviews where he said he did not write those issues himself under a pseudonym. He speculated it was editor Eddie Berganza. The only thing that creates a little bit of a wrinkle here, interesting for you and I in particular to talk about, on the DC website and the DC app, our pal Joe Kelly is listed as the writer.
Oh.
Now, I wouldn't be shocked if the app were simply wrong. However, Joe Kelly, of course, had a long run on Action Comics under the editorial direction of Eddie Berganza. To me, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that Eddie might have said, like, hey, we need to wrap these up. Can you do something? And I know I'm really plunging us to the end here, but reading those last couple of issues and the last one in particular, you have Superman who's been imprisoned by Gog for hundreds of years, and Gog tempts him with the opportunity to go back and change the course of time, to rewrite events, but he'd have to sacrifice a life in order to be able to do it. That's the gist of it. And Superman will not. He will not give in to that temptation, because to do that would undermine the very beings that he's trying to save. And reading that, I said to myself, it feels very much in keeping with the version of Superman that Joe Kelly gave us. So I don't have an answer. I will admit, I emailed Joe earlier today. I've not gotten a response as of recording. And I tried to be diplomatic about it. I was like, I 100% understand if this is not something you can answer. I said, but I'm just curious. It's been this ongoing question about who J.D. Finn actually was. I said, if you're able to answer, I'd be really curious. Like I said, I have not heard back, but honestly, I suspect it's likely one of those two guys. I'd be pretty surprised if it was some third party.
Both. I mean, superhero comics have a long history of the editor being like, well, I'm going to tell you what happens. You just got to write it out. So,
yeah. Now, I guess we can jump into those first couple of fill-in issues. Here's the other thing that I wanted to say at the top, which is kind of a more overall assessment of Chuck Austen's DC bibliography. He also did an arc on JLA called Pain of the Gods, which you and I also took a look at. We can mention that as well before we wrap up. But in my mind, I kind of look at these works as a tale of two Chuck Austens, because I look at those two fill-in issues and I look at Superman Metropolis and I say, these were solid.
Yeah.
Like, I enjoyed these. None of it is on the app. Superman Metropolis has never been collected. And I say to myself, boy, that's a shame. Like, it's this great Jimmy-centric story, interesting ideas, plays around with the B-13 tech, coming on the heels of the Loeb Kelly run, all that stuff that we talked about. Solid. Like, I enjoyed those two fill-ins and the maxi series. And then we get to the Action Comics run, and that's where, to me, this really kind of falls apart. But I don't want to paint with a broad brush, and credit where credit's due. What I guess I can say is that Action run, first of all, it has beautiful art by a young Ivan Reis.
Yeah.
So that's terrific. It lives up to its title. It is very action-packed. I think that cuts both ways because it is so briskly paced. I mean, if I spent 5 minutes reading an issue, that was a long time.
Great.
It was great. I mean, it was
because I hate reading. I read a lot. I read many, many comic books, and I hate getting to an issue or a trade, and it's just obvious that the writer and the artist were not on the same page, and they didn't trust each other, and you have exposition or unnecessary. I tried to read. I hated it so much. I have to name it. I tried to read the Simon Spurrier Flash trade paper. I stopped. I never do that. I stopped halfway through. I was like, this is awful. And then the next thing I read was the Chuck Austen run for this, and I flew through it, and I was just enjoying it because it was like, these are good comics. Some things are happening. I can follow it. No one's having to tell me what is going on. I can absorb it at my own pace. I'm a huge Kingdom Come fan, so seeing Gog/Magog there, it's like, I could have read another 20 issues and I wouldn't have complained.
all right.
Yeah.
Well, look, in terms of prepping for this episode, it was a breeze.
Yeah,
I appreciated it from that perspective. And I also, look, I mean, I owned these issues back in the day. I think I sold them or traded them in for the trade paperbacks and then sold those. I've owned this run in various forms over the years. I currently don't own it at all, but I read it on the app. And so it's not like I was going out and paying $2.25 or whatever the price was at the time, like to read it now. But I think if I were, and kind of putting myself back in my shoes in 2004, I think I do remember having that sense of like, wow, that was got through that in a couple of minutes. So it just felt awfully light to me, but in terms of prep, but all that to say that it's briskly paced. There's a lot of action. The art is great. There's a lot about it that's inoffensive, if not enjoyable. And clearly, like, you enjoyed a lot of it. To me, the two places where it hits roadblocks or hurdles that it just does not overcome for me.
Yeah.
One is the characterization of Superman, and the other is all of the business with Lana.
Yeah.
And we'll get into it more specifically, but I guess on both of those fronts, what's particularly frustrating and even tragic to me about it is that I think the underlying idea or motivation behind both of those things, the way Superman speaks and the way Lana tries to throw a wrench in this marriage, there are kind of interesting ideas at play. I just do not care for the way they were executed. And I don't feel like the approach they took was at all appropriate. And it's so fun. Those things are so fundamental that it all kind of broke down. Like when we talk about quote unquote, and I don't like being reductive like this, but when we talk about the worst runs, I know, sometimes maybe the Bendis run might be in the conversation, and I've not been the biggest defender of the Bendis run.
That was awful.
But here's the thing, and I've said this so many times, and I'll continue to say this, and in defense of Bendis, I felt like he at least had the voice of the character down, and that allowed me to get something out of it, even as I disagreed deeply with so many of the choices that he made.
Yeah. Like
Stanley in The Office, it's like everything you would do, I would do differently. But I felt like he got the voice of the
show The Office.
Yeah.
I thought you were making a Stan Lee joke.
No.
I was like, wait, is that your Stan Lee impression?
No.
That does not sound like
I don't
him
have
at all.
one. No,
Okay.
no. But I felt like he always had the voice down. And here I felt like he didn't. And so that really took me out of it. And then the Lana of it all really just was just very, very off-putting. So that's kind of where I land on it. So for anyone who's listening to this, it's like, I don't even know how to put this. I mean, it wasn't like, oh my God, this was so awful to get through.
Yeah.
Not at all. And honestly, if you read this, it would take you an hour, I think. So there's that.
Can I, while I'm building my own gallows here, can I put out a hot take?
Sure.
So on the way here to Flat Squirrel Studios, I was listening to the episode where you discussed collected editions.
Yes.
And you said how great the Jeff Johns, Gary Frank run was. I want to go on the record as saying that I enjoyed the Chuck Austen run more than those stories because I could barely get through those nostalgia bait stories. These things I was flying through, I read them twice. So just to put it into perspective of how much I like this and what you consider a good run versus what I consider a good run, I just want everyone to know what the stakes are here. Like you give me Secret Origin, Brainiac, Superman and the Legion of Superheroes, and I'm going to be like, great, I'm going to get those out of my collection so that I can go back and buy another version of Pain of the Gods or whatever that was called.
I think I'm just going to let that sit there for
Yeah.
a moment.
Oh, yeah. Please. Yeah. Tell us in the comments below, kids.
No, look, one of the things that I have found, we've talked about this from time to time, no matter what it is we're discussing, I think because with the internet and social media, it's like, you hear from everybody, right?
Yeah.
Or a lot of people. And so I feel like no matter what we talk about, there's always some amount of mixed opinion.
Yeah.
And even when you talk about something that most people generally seem to love or most people generally seem to hate, there are always opposing views.
Yeah.
So that's fine. I think that's made me more open-minded and it's fine. And in your defense, right? One thing that I will say is I do get where you're coming from as far as this desire for something different, a new approach, and gravitating towards something that gives you that, as opposed to something that you feel maybe is a step backward, or that nostalgia bait, like you said. Like I do, I mean, I get that. It's hard for me to really see how this would be the run that would be the one, but I get it. It's not like, I don't understand what he's talking about. Like I do understand. And I did go back through a bunch of Chuck Austen's interviews that he did with CBR around the time. And I'll be quoting from those shortly, because he did 2 before he took over.
Yeah.
And then he did an in-depth post-mortem after. Very interesting. But just in terms of him talking about his historical lack of interest in Superman, and then delving into the back issues and really gravitating towards the Siegel and Schuster Golden Age stories, and that really lighting his fire and wanting to take a different approach that was evocative of that. I mean, it sounds like what he was doing or attempting to do as a writer is not dissimilar from what you were looking for as a reader.
It's me. I was Chuck Austen.
Are you JD Finn? God damn it,
JD
everybody.
Finn. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. 15-year-old me was JD Finn.
All
Guys,
right, listen,
I'm sorry.
call up. Let's get Bleeding Cool on the line. This episode is going to go bonkers in the downloads. J.D. Finn finally unmasked Mike Sangregorio.
Yeah.
He wrote those couple of issues during his study period.
Exactly. Probably aping a Joe Kelly style. Now that I think about it,
I will say, whoever J.D. Finn was, I actually thought kind of stuck the landing of the story.
I'm going to be honest with you. I now think it's Joe Kelly. Even if he responds to you and says, Anthony, absolutely no questions asked, was not me. I'm going to go home and reread those two, assuming it was him, and see if I could pick out a tick
That's
or
the
two.
thing. I do not have any inside information. I want to be very clear about that. But just the fact that he's listed on the website and then reading those stories, I was just like, and especially the Superman who's been in prison for hundreds of years and will not break. When I read that, I was like, oh, I think this is Joe.
No, it makes sense because Eddie Berganza is credited as a writer on other issues. I think ones we've even read
Superboy
during the Joe Kelly run, right? Didn't he? He did like random fill-in issues on that Joe Kelly run.
He did fill-ins on the Superboy title in the 90s, and he was the co-writer on Joe Kelly's Superboy run.
That's what I was thinking of. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, maybe one day we'll be able to answer that mystery definitively, but we at least have a little bit of a theory here.
Can I tell very quickly my favorite Chuck Austen story?
Sure.
So this is how deep into fandom that I was. So one of the things that people cite is something they really, really don't like on his X-Men run. And again, I want to say there's a lot in there that hasn't aged well, wasn't great at the time, was super questionable, whatever. But one thing that people really, really hated was that he made the Juggernaut a good guy. And he did that by having him sleep with She-Hulk.
Yes.
And it was a big thing. Like, She-Hulk's a lawyer. She sees the good in him. He was misunderstood. He's going to be an X-Man. And then in the very last issue, his entire redemption arc is thrown out the window. It's never mentioned again, whatever. I loved it. I think getting rid of it was a mistake. But two things. One, it forced Dan Slott, who is, I think, closer to you, and it comes in his fandom, who likes things neat and orderly, and he's got the voice of the character in his head, create a back door to explain that. And he did this long arc when he was writing She-Hulk to explain it. And I remember reading that and going, man, this guy lives rent-free in your head, Mr. Slott. Like, this is crazy. And fast forward to today, based on what I've read on covers and solicits, Juggernaut's a good guy again. So it's like, guys, like y'all need to get over yourself. Like, this was, if you actually read it, it was not nearly as bad as you think it was. I think a lot of the hate comes from people who just heard about it or, were already angry when they picked it up. I'm like, what is this? This isn't my book. But it's like, nah, man, I was reading it before. I continued reading after it. I thought it was great. I was rooting for Kane.
All right. Right on, man.
Yeah.
Well, I will say it starts off on a positive note. So this issue of Man of Steel number 129, great story, I thought, where Superman strikes up this friendship with this cop, Wit, and they begin this tradition of getting coffee and donuts together at this local diner. Superman saves him, and then in the aftermath, you have people on the street taking Superman to task for not putting a more permanent end to the bad guys he encounters. Yeah. Shades of the Elite, right? It's funny. I mean, I read this at the time. I haven't read it in 20 years. And as it started, I was like, oh, all right, well, this is just retreading the same ground we've been over before. But it takes a different approach. And Wit steps in and invites Superman out. And what was cool, I thought, was that they're in the diner. And then we see more action unfolding. And then they're back in the diner. And I thought initially that, it's just the one time at the diner. And then we're just kind of seeing it play out, breaking up the time of it. But no, this became a tradition of theirs. And initially, there's a conversation at one point between the workers at the diner of like, they want to tell people. It's like, no, then I'll stop coming. And sure enough, it gets to the point where there's a line around the block because they all want to see Superman. And it's this really bittersweet moment between Wit and Superman where they shake hands and essentially say like, all right, that's it. We can't really do this anymore. But they're going to do it one last time because Superman doesn't want to leave the people hanging, and they came to see them and all of that. I thought this was a genuinely enjoyable human interest story. What did you think of it?
I loved every page of it. Yeah, it was actually, so I read it in the wrong order. That was the last one I read. So it was this wonderful send-off of when, I don't want to spoil the ending, but halfway through, when he thinks he's not going to have coffee with Superman anymore, he talks about his wife who had passed away, and he looks at Superman flying away, and he just goes, now I got two people I'm going to miss. And I was like, that's great. That is awesome. Like, I think the main theme of all of his Superman stories is like, what if Clark were more of a normal dude?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Whether or not you like that, it hit home with me. So I like the idea that this, gray-haired storied cop is like, nah, man, I hung out with him. He's like a normal person. He's actually pretty cool. Like we sit here and we eat together. So when he looks up and he goes, man, I'm gonna miss two people. It's like, you're not missing Superman the hero. You're missing Superman the man. And I was like, that's great. Like that's just, why don't we have more stories like this? Or if we do, I haven't read them.
Yeah, no, I really dug it a lot. And I do remember enjoying it at the time. This was a fill-in issue during the Mark Schultz tenure on the title, which I've come to enjoy more now upon revisitation. At the time, that usually wasn't my favorite of the 4 books. So, I mean, I remember having a positive impression of 129, and I still do. And I agree. We won't spoil the very ending if people want to check it out, even though it's not on the app and it's not collected, but you know where to go if you're looking to find it. But it was, I thought, a satisfying payoff to that. And yeah, they're just having these conversations, trading war stories and stuff like that. Yeah, it was a really sweet story.
Yeah.
And then a little bit of a shift here, but I was still on board with Superman 188, another fill-in issue, where Superman is acting out. He's acting very out of character. He's more quippy. He's throwing people through store windows. He's throwing cars through buildings. He's really taking out a lot of aggression on the adversaries he encounters. But then you do find out why. Take it from there.
Do. Yeah. Do you want to spoil it? What do you?
I think we can.
Oh,
I think this is worth explaining because when you and that's the funny thing too. Now rereading it, knowing what the Action Comics run is going to be like and what the characterization is going to be like. When I started this, I was like, oh my God, like, is he starting off with this version of the character from the jump? But no, there ends up actually being a reason for it. And in terms of some examples of what I'm talking about, like in the beginning, one of a civilian's car gets demolished during this battle, and they ask him about the car, and he's like, I can, carve my initials in it with heat vision. You could sell it and make some. It's like that sort of vibe. But yeah, then we do find out what's fueling all of this.
Yeah, so you find out that we're not told any of this from Superman's point of view. Lois, the greatest reporter in the world, figures it out. She goes to the children's hospital where where Superman usually visits and, makes the kids' day and does what he can to children who are suffering. And you find out that someone Lois knew by name, a child that was particularly close to Superman, who had been homeless before she was brought into the hospital, passed away. And Superman found out, and he just loses it. And he's fighting these B and C tier villains. And he's like, why are you still drawing breath? And this child is not, this is insane. There's no order to the world. And you could just see him getting very close to the precipice of like, why am I even bothering with this? If someone that pure can't continue on, and Taserface here is hurting people on the morning commute. You could just see the line, he's approaching. He never goes over it. He's still Superman. But at the end, when Lois is comforting him, it's just, again, oh yeah, right. You're a human being. And it's nice to be reminded of that.
Yeah. And look, there's no easy out for this. He just continues to ask why, why over those final panels there, even as time passes. It's reminiscent of the episode Vengeance from season 5 of Smallville, which is right after Jonathan Kent has met his end, and Clark is out there and he's being rough, right, on the criminals he encounters, and articulates exactly that same idea that you just shared of like, well, why is my dad dead and people like you get to go on living?
And what's he say in the movie? With all my great strength, I couldn't save him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. That's with great power comes great responsibility, right? That's the man who can do anything has to get used to loss. I mean, that's it. That hurts him more than kryptonite. You can hurt him and he's going to walk away from it. He's going to be like, no, I'm doing the right thing. But an innocent person, I mean, he just, he feels it. It could have been his own kid.
Now, in terms of the verbal lashing out and the amount of violence and property destruction that he engages in, I don't know. This might be now veering into the territory of, I feel like the voice is off here, but we do get that accounting for why he's behaving this way. And so I did appreciate that. So interestingly,
But wait, if he's inspired by Golden Age Superman, then
True.
your voice is off, but not the voice. Like, I mean, you've read some of those Golden Age stories.
Yeah.
Tell me that doesn't sound like the guy, putting Hitler in front of the world court and beating up, capitalists who abuse their workers. I mean, that seemed pretty familiar to me.
In fairness, but it's like not in keeping with the version of the character we've been reading, and that was appearing in the other books at the time. But yes, no, and once more, in fairness, if you really factor in, if you really go, for anyone who's listening to this, like, I got to read this now for myself. I mean, I think if you really go in knowing that Chuck Austen was a guy who really had no attachment to Superman, other than the Reeve movie, which is like, everybody's watched
Everyone
that.
saw it, yeah.
And was really taken with the more aggressive dispenser of justice of the Golden Age. If you kind of go in with that in mind, I do think it will track more and you'll get more out of it, but it just felt out of step with the version of the character that had existed. But no, like I said, when we get that payoff of why he's acting like that, it was moving. And so through interviews, those old interviews that I found, and then also he did a guest appearance on the Dollar Bin Bandits podcast.
Yes, he did.
One of our pals, Joe Marcello, he's one of the hosts of that. And he talked about how essentially, I think the way those fill-ins came to be was Eddie Berganza was like, I need some stories. And Chuck was like, I don't have any. But then he thought about it, right? And he came up with a handful. And he said Eddie bought all of them. Now, obviously, only those couple made it to print. But he has talked about how his original version of the story, I don't know if this was a pitch or fully scripted or what, but his original version of the story wasn't this child who had passed away from an illness, but rather was Lois suffering a miscarriage because her body couldn't sustain the alien life inside. Yeah. And that this was informed by Chuck's personal experience, but was told no, was just flat out told, no, you can't do that story. It was just interesting to kind of know what the original way into that story was, and then how it shifted over to this. Yeah. But definitely that is another one that I certainly would recommend that people check out, because I did think it was interesting.
If DC announces that they are going to finally do a Chuck Austen collected edition, someone listens to this show. Like if that gets announced, that's right?
The test.
Like,
okay.
Yeah. If the next round of solicits has by popular demand the collected Chuck Austen, some editor or whoever does trade paperbacks over there is listening to this episode.
I know that this is a good way to test it.
Yeah,
this is a good way to
Josh
test
is never getting Electric Volume 2, but I'm buying that. I'm going to Mark. I'm buying the Chuck Austen, then I'm going to have Chuck sign it.
And I don't say breaks my heart, but the thing that kills me is that it's like this would be a perfect compendium. So DC, here's the thing. You got the 12 issues of Action Comics, plus those couple of backup stories. You got 12 issues of Metropolis, and you've got these other 2 fill-in issues. That's a couple dozen. That's a little bit more. That's perfect. Perfect for a compendium.
Do it.
You can't call it Superman by Chuck Austen. We have to market it differently, but there's material there.
But you know what? You can, because there are people who weren't even alive when you and I were reading these things. And all they know is, hey, Chuck Austen, I know that name. He's bad. Like, this is why everyone watches the movie The Room, or they listen to music they know is bad. Like, the worst music in the world is the most played music of all time. I have to Google people's names to find out they're terrible human beings. It's the same thing. If you put out a Chuck Austen collected edition, I bet it sells better than most of the stuff that you and Josh were talking about on a previous episode, just because people are like, well, why do people hate this so much? Why? I don't understand. Why is this so reviled? I bet it would sell through the roof. I really do. And that's before you get to just people, repirating it online.
You might be right. I don't know. And it's funny to talk about people's age. Like, people weren't alive at the time. When we did our crypto episode recently, and one of our audience members was like, "Oh, I was watching the Cartoon Network crypto series when I was a toddler." I was like, "What?" It made me feel so old. So it's like, I was in college then, and this guy was a toddler watching this show. So yeah, I do have to factor that in.
I have a very good friend who we talk about movies with, and the other day he said to me, "Well, I had Instagram in high school," and I was like, all the blood drained from my face. It was like I am old, but I am very old.
Yeah, no, man, I hear you. All right, so we have those couple of fill-ins, and then we get what I genuinely would argue is an underrated gem. And as it's not ever been collected, and it's not on the app, I feel like there's so many people who probably don't even know what this is, but that's Superman Metropolis maxi series. Now, the first 6 issues were drawn by Daniel Zezelj, if I'm saying that correctly, and I'm probably not.
Yeah, I know he's Croatian. I cannot pronounce Croatian names.
And I bought and read this at the time. I totally forgot that he only did the first 6, and then we had Teddy Christensen who did 7 through 12. I got a lot more out of the first half of this in a couple of different ways, but overall, I still found this very intriguing. Yeah. And this is something I remember reading this at the time, and it just, I don't know if it was reading it month to month or that even Zezelj's art didn't grab me the first time around, but I don't know what it was. But at the time, I remember not really loving it, but I really enjoyed it.
Oh, I loved it. Hold on. Okay. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm not reading any of the other stuff, just hunt down Superman Metropolis. You're probably never going to see it. I've never seen it in the wild. It's so good. It's called Superman Metropolis because it's about the city, the height of the B-13 infestation. But it's almost Spider-Man-esque. You know, Jimmy has these things where he describes which train he's taking to which station, which part of the city. He does the classic thing of naming every intersection after famous creators, but he paints a picture of the city. And you know, we're next to New York. I work down there. It's like this is the city. This is what Chuck is going for, and it was just so beautiful. And then to give it a name and a voice and to see him falling in love with it, like it just works. Like over the course of 12 issues, you see why it's called Metropolis. It's not called Superman's Pal. It's not called anything else. It's a man and the place he lives and finally finding a connection there.
It is. I agree with all of that, but it is also a great story for Jimmy and a rare instance. Look, it's no Who Killed Jimmy Olsen. That's already been established. By the way, we texted about this, but we didn't talk about it on the show. But after we did our Who Killed Jimmy Olsen episode, artist Steve Lieber shared it on social media, and it sounded like he had listened because he seemed to be endorsing it, unless he just.
Well, then let me say once again, I love you, Mr. Lieber. I do.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. But no, it is this great Jimmy Olsen story. So we're not going to go issue by issue or anything like that. But the gist of it is that at first, it seems like it's the tech itself that is communicating to Jimmy through the signal watch. Yeah. We come to find out it's a little bit deeper than that. It's the AI or the operating system that controls the tech that was essentially imprinted or modeled after Lena Luthor, who, of course, Lex traded to Brainiac 13 at the end of Y2K in order to regain control over or retain control over the technology.
Do you know what's great? You don't need to know any of that.
True. Yeah, you don't.
Yeah. If you're listening to this and you randomly find the 12 issues at a convention or something for like $1, you don't, like, everything Anthony says is completely accurate, but you don't need to know all that. Like, he goes out of his way to say, let's assume you only know Jimmy Olsen through his mass media adaptations. He doesn't even use the word Brainiac. He makes a point of saying everyone just calls it the tech.
Yeah.
The city of tomorrow is finally the city of tomorrow. And there's a woman named Lena, and she might have a connection to Lex. And then eventually you find out she's the ghost in the machine, and he's just in love with a new character. And it's just, it's a wonderful standalone story while still connecting to and heightening the big event that was going on at the time.
Yeah, fair. I mean, that's true. If you really want to boil it down, this tech becomes self-aware and begins communicating with Jimmy. I mean, that's the heart of it. Do you know what it reminded me of? Did you ever see the movie Her?
No, I haven't.
Oh, a very good movie.
Have I ever said yes when you've asked me about a movie or show?
The fact that I'm like, did you watch Boy Meets World? And you're like, no. I was like, come on.
Sorry. I failed you.
But Her is great. Okay. Spike Jonze movie, Joaquin Phoenix, where he develops this relationship with AI voiced by Scar. Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
But it had shades of that because for a good portion of the story, quote unquote, Lena is communicating to Jimmy via his signal watch.
Yeah.
And essentially, she is trying to gain experience. And so she's conducting experiments, like for lack of a better term. In the first issue, there's a political candidate who's running for Senate who gets shot and dies, but she uses the tech to revive him.
Nanites. It's nanites. Yeah. It's magic nanites.
But then when he loses the election and Lena realizes that there aren't going to be any new experiences to glean from this person, she realizes it's not worth the power it takes in order to keep him alive. So he perishes. He expires. There's another one where she makes these two elderly people young.
Yeah.
Another one, and this really plays into especially the second half of the maxi series, but she fuses the villains Sledge and Kilgrave together. So there's a bunch of stuff like that. There's a couple who loses their infant child, and she grows them a new one from their genetic material.
Not even an infant. I think they make a point of saying that the child was
old, right?
The child was born too early. So when they go in and they see a newborn child that they know is theirs, even though they've never seen it before, that's even more like they refuse to leave the apartment. Like, what if someone come and take this away? Which, again, I thought was a good retelling of the Martha and Jonathan Kent story.
Yeah.
Like, what if someone comes and takes this away from us?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Also, important to note that this context is provided in the book, but none of these experiments are being done maliciously.
Right.
Like they go out of their way. Jimmy says, "Oh, wait a second. You're a child. Like you're a newborn. You're learning at an advanced rate, but nothing you've done is actually bad. You haven't killed anyone or done anything wrong." So that's why Jimmy is constantly like, "Hey, I want to direct you into a good place because this city is full of people who would love to take advantage of you." And that's one of the reasons they end up falling for each other.
Yeah, like initially she does come off as more childlike and petulant at times. It's more antagonistic with Jimmy at first. She does say, it's interesting when we get to the point of like why she chose him to communicate with. And she's like, she scanned all the people in the vicinity, right? And he was the one who stood out. And she also thought he was cute. So there's that. But yeah, I mean, really interesting. And it does get to the point where she creates a physical form for herself and leaves the tech and has a magical time with Jimmy.
Yeah.
And they share a kiss. It's a really, tender moment. But unfortunately, without her to administer the technology, the city is falling apart.
Yeah.
And this really brings us to like the halfway point of the maxi series where Superman realizes what's going on and brings the actual Lena Luthor, the baby Lena Luthor, to Jimmy and quote unquote Lena, and says like, look, she can't be who she thinks she is, right? This is the real Lena Luthor. And the tech version makes the sacrifice and relinquishes this physical form and goes back into the machine. And it causes a little bit of tension between Jimmy and Super. And as far as the Jimmy of it all, we talked about this when we did that episode, but in that first issue, when the candidate gets shot and Jimmy doesn't miss a beat and he's the first one to move and he gets on top of that podium and he's like, they're all going to hate me for this, for taking advantage of this moment, for not helping, for getting the shot instead of helping, but they'll remember this photo forever. Yeah. And he doesn't swear. No. Right. That's another thing. And so much so that when it gets to the point in the story where he's frustrated with Perry and he's like, it's none of your damn business. It's like, whoa. Right. But this all, I texted you because, I'm going into this thinking like Chuck Austen. I'm not going like this. And I texted you when I got to this issue. I think it was number 7. I was like, was that one of the best Jimmy Superman scenes? Right? Wasn't it so good?
It was amazing. It was so good the whole time. I'm looking at this. I'm like, this is great. Like one of my favorite things is they go out of their way to describe Jimmy as a photojournalist. He's not a cub reporter. He's not a photographer. He's a photojournalist. And there's great scenes. Like this is a great Perry story too. Like they're constantly like, Jimmy wants to write his own copy. Jimmy wants to write his own stories. And then they're challenging him. And you're seeing why he falls short of that. It's like, this doesn't just feature the Daily Planet staff. It actually uses them as part of the story. It was so great.
Yeah. No, it's, well, while we're on the note of the relationship, there's a funny thing too, because in the first issue, Clark, this is the point where Clark has been quote unquote fired, but he's still secretly working for Perry. But anyway, he's off panel asked Jimmy for help with the story to take photos. And like Jimmy basically blows him off, but then Superman shows up and brings Jimmy along because essentially Superman saw that candidate who had been shot and then somehow rose from the dead and realizes that the tech was involved. And so he wants to go to investigate, and he brings Jimmy. And I love when Jimmy's like, why am I here? Superman's like, I want to see something like if things get weird, like I wanted a witness or like something like that. But I liked it because it was just kind of like, he just wants Jimmy there. He wants his pal. But there is a point where the tech is talking and then Jimmy is asking questions about what the tech just said. And the Superman's like, were you not paying attention? Yeah. Which was interesting because it plays into this whole idea in this story that Jimmy lacks focus. And that's why he hasn't advanced the way he wants to at the planet. Yeah. But at the same time, I said to myself, this is totally my headcanon, like my read of the scene. But I can't help but wonder, maybe Superman was a little frustrated with Jimmy because Jimmy blew off Clark. right? Like Clark asked for
I
help.
thought that's what it was.
Yeah.
I
I think it was both. I mean, I don't know, a little bit, but like, I love that. I love that idea.
Yeah. Oh, you don't respond to my calls now that I'm not at the planet anymore. No, he was flexing. He was like, no, you answer if I show up in a red cape. Yeah, it was like, it's like getting dumped and then going out and buying a brand new car. It's like, of course that's what he did. Because this version, Austen's Superman is petulant. You know, he's the guy in Action Comics #1 throwing a car into a wall.
And I will say, there's not a ton of Superman in the story.
No.
He's there from time to time, but it's not really not a Superman story.
No.
Maybe that's why I liked it more, because I didn't have to linger with Chuck Austen's version of Superman per se. But issue 7, right after Jimmy has had to sacrifice this burgeoning relationship with Lena, because essentially Superman said, you just got to go back into the machine. They have this conversation. And Jimmy's talking about how he didn't even realize how lonely he was until Lena came along. And then Superman starts talking about his wife, because as has been established in the Loeb Kelly era, Jimmy knows Superman is married. He doesn't know to whom. And in fact, it becomes clear here in the scene that Jimmy assumes it's Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
And Superman's like, no, it's not Wonder Woman. Like, can we let this go? And Jimmy's like, no, we can't. So he really forces the issue. And then the next scene, I guess they're at Jimmy's apartment. Superman's lying on the couch eating popcorn, talking to Jimmy. And like, they just have a full-on conversation like that. And that's the scene. I'm like, this is great.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was terrific. And it gets to the point, I guess the main takeaway from this is that Jimmy feels Superman can't identify with what Jimmy is going through in this specific instance, given who Superman is and what he experiences in his day to day.
And I think that's probably the author speaking up as well.
Yeah.
Like again, I've never met Chuck Austen, but I'm pretty sure that what Jimmy is saying, what Jimmy is espousing, is probably how he viewed the character and why he tried to write him in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. But Jimmy has this line about how essentially imagining what Superman's day to day is like. And it's like, you probably show up to rescue women and they're there in their underwear, like excited to be rescued. And then Superman tells a story about this woman who jumped off a bridge in a trench coat to get his attention and wasn't wearing anything underneath. And Jimmy's like, was she hot? And Superman goes, she jumped off of a bridge to get my attention. She's insane. Of course she was hot. And at the end of that scene, he says to Jimmy, he's like, well, let's just keep that between us. And I said to myself, so there's a line here. Like in that scene, people might read that and be like, oh, Superman win. But to me, I felt like, no, okay, that actually tracked. This is a kind of conversation these buddies would have. And going back to our Jimmy conversation, that's the angle that I want for those two. They should be able to have a conversation like, hey, Jimmy, you won't believe what happened to me today.
Because who else is he going to tell? He can't like open up a Justice League meeting with, guess what just happened to me today? You can't call Batman. But that's what Jimmy is. He's the voice he can talk to. He's the sidekick. He's the pal. He's like, what crazy nonsense happened to me today? You got to listen to this. Jimmy's going to be like, that's insane. Guess what happened to me today? And then they go home. They get it off their chest. They get it out there.
And Superman apologizes.
Yeah,
and essentially what Superman says is that, he understands, like he understands what Jimmy's going through, but he also recognizes that in that instance, he put the needs of the city. He's a slave to the city, just like Lena is. Yeah. And he put the needs of the city above the needs of his friend. And he apologizes.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a great moment. I feel like the back half of the maxi series, we move away from those quote unquote experiments to gain experience, which I thought were more interesting. And then it becomes more of a battle for control of the tech between Lena and Kilgrave. Yeah, and that's where it kind of lost me a little bit.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I knew Sledge was a real character. I know he was generic muscle through the 90s. Yeah. Other things you've had me read has had.
I think the Kyle Rayner run. We hit on that. Yeah.
But I just assumed that Professor Kilgrave was a character he invented for this because of how well he uses him in the back half. But he's not, right? He's an earlier, I think he's a John Byrne creation. Is that true?
I don't even know offhand.
Oh, okay. I figured you'd be the guy.
I'm not positive. Yeah. I'm not positive.
Because at first I was like, oh, it's a great name, Purple Man's name, whatever. And then I looked him up and the DC Wiki's got an entry for him going back to Byrne. And I was like, oh man, you pulled a Kingpin. You took this generic, uninteresting character and you really rebuilt him into something. And it's a shame no one can use him after that. But I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of it is for control of the tech. And I mean, long story short, in the end, they're able to defeat Kilgrave, and Lena is able to escape from the tech and regain her human form. It was interesting because we end the story with Jimmy and Lena, and I'm like, oh, what did they ever do with her beyond
Nothing.
that?
Zilch.
So it's well, two things. One, yes, they did next to nothing. I think she appears. It's like essentially a cameo in the next arc with Majestic in the main. Do you remember that one?
Oh, that I bought. Okay. I love Mr. Majestic.
So she pops up like once or twice in that, but and then that's it. Which I'm like, what? Like,
really?
I feel like a missed opportunity there. But I feel like this maxi series was so under the radar. That I guess I'm not shocked. But you had mentioned before, like at the height of the B13. What's funny is that like this wasn't the timing of this was weird because we got the tech in 2000. There was 99 to 2000. Y2K. And then they don't do this maxi series. It ends in 2004. And then the next arc, in fact, because I bought these issues on eBay. Okay. I owned them at the time. I sold them. Prepping for this, I was like, I'll just bite the bullet. I think it was like $15 for the whole thing. I'm like, I'll just get it. Which was great, by the way, because anytime I have that opportunity, it's like such a time warp, right? Because you're seeing all the house ads and everything. It's great. And then they had their whole, coming up next, right? The letters. Well, it wasn't a letters page at that point, but previews of upcoming stuff. And at the end of issue 12, it's like, make sure you follow, the Majestic storyline and the super titles next month for the final fate of the city. So this was like the end. I mean, I feel like this should have come probably a lot earlier, but whatever. But yeah, then we got that Majestic 3-parter, which I just kind of skimmed through to refamiliarize myself. And
I take it you haven't read Jim Lee's Wildcats to familiarize yourself with Mr. Majestic. Okay.
No, I mean, just generally. And I had read the Majestic stuff earlier, at the time. But essentially that marks the end of the B13 future version. On.
So you skipped one part. The character that I really like that he uses in this book is Jack Ryder.
I knew.
Yeah. So,
well, we'll get to him even more in the Action Comics run. He's clearly a big Creeper fan.
Well, but I think that's really cool because, Jack Ryder is like the anti-Clark Kent, right? Clark Kent is the classic, progressive reporter. I'm going to use the First Amendment. I'm going to use the power of print to fix people, to help everything else. And Jack Ryder is a conservative nut job, right? And he constantly threatens to use what power he does have, especially on TV to ruin people. And then, this isn't even spelled out in the book. It's the one complaint I had. If you weren't familiar with him, you'd be like, who is the Creeper? What's his connection to Jack Ryder? But the Creeper is the perfect comparison to Superman because he also wants to help people. He's not as evil as his human ID, but he's basically the Joker. So he just ends up scaring people off. So the fact that Chuck Austen was able to set him up as the anti-Clark, the truth, justice for a better tomorrow, and have Jimmy confront that. I was like, well, that's perfect. Like that, as far as I'm concerned, like the Creeper belongs in Metropolis. He should never go home to Gotham.
All right, fair. I've never been a big Creeper fan, so this did not.
Steve Ditko, my friend, the man himself.
I know.
Sturdy Steve, excuse me. He would not appreciate being called the man.
True.
Yeah.
But that's fine. But yeah, clearly a character that Austen has some affinity for. Used him here, used him in the run.
Yeah, he was in 775. I think Joe Kelly might be Mr. Flynn. But
that's true. Yeah,
he was in 775. Yeah.
But anyway, just going back to the tech, just because we've talked about it so much recently, going through the Loeb Kelly stuff. So right after Metropolis, there's that 3-parter with Majestic where there's a time storm because the futuristic technology was never meant to be here. So time is writing itself, and the heroes and scientists of the DCU try to stop it, and Majestic intervenes and prevents them from doing that because he realizes the natural course that needs to flow. And once that happens, then we are returned to the regular traditional version of Metropolis. Again, not part of the Metropolis maxi series, but I just wanted to mention anything else from the maxi series that we didn't talk about that you wanted to hit.
The art on the second half is rough. It's really rough. I was not familiar with that guy's work, but there were some panels where I was like, is this impressionist? Like I had no idea what was going on. But I bought it, when Jimmy is talking about how lonely he is and everything else. And it's like, of course, this person who not only he can help, but he's kind of like used to the idea of dealing with someone who has godlike power, right? Like Lena controls the entire city, which again is basically like, Manhattan. It's the center of the world and she's in control. She makes something as mundane as the coffee pots in the courthouse go on, but she also runs the entire commuter rail system. Presumably she runs a ton of other stuff. Lex is behind the scenes. They're talking about how he's trying to patent everything he can get a hold of. We know from other books that the tech comes from the 64th century, which is where Abracadabra is from, who is a magician who uses science. It's the same bleeding edge nanite you see in every science fiction from the time. So the idea that Jimmy looks at her and says, "Oh yes, you have unlimited power. My best friend has unlimited power. I'm going to talk you through this." And then when he does, she's like, "Oh, wait, you're talking to me like a person. I want to be a person. I want to hang out with you. Oh no, we're in love." Like the whole thing is so natural that when they end up together and they're just holding hands, I'm like, this feels like such an epic win. Like the bad guy was stopped. Absolutely. And the city is saved and everything else. But just standing there, two people holding hands, it's like, man, you found each other. Yeah, like a time storm is going to take you away because you live in the DC universe. But for that one brief, beautiful moment, again, it's humanizing the divine. I think that's what Austen did so well.
Fair. Yeah. I mean, I think it does delve into some interesting questions about what it even means to be alive, to be a person.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I mean, the notion of there being a ghost in the machine,
yeah.
I kind of surprised they hadn't hit on that earlier, right? Because there's so many references to the B-13 tech. So the fact that there's something a little bit more going on inside, very intriguing.
I feel like he looked at this stuff from the outside and said, "What is this? Okay, it's nanites, it's high tech, it's got to be a consciousness, right? Because there's no operator, there's no one standing. It runs on its own, right? So you got to have Clippy or something, or Siri or whatever. We didn't have Siri back then, but you know what I'm talking about. Like there has to be someone in there, running this stuff. And again, we're talking about the post-Matrix period. The idea of sentient programs, sentient applications was like, that was in the zeitgeist. So the fact that he uses it to tell a love story, for lack of a better term, I thought was a really great idea.
Attention horror fans, Colleen, A Vlada Tale of the Damned is the forthcoming comic book sequel to Vlada, A Dracula Tale, a gender-swapped spin on the world of Dracula, featuring an original story by Chris Denmead and art by Matt Slay and Tim Vigil. The Kickstarter campaign for this 28-page comic launches on August 15th. Visit Colleen, A Vlada Tale of the Damned on Kickstarter and sign up now to be notified on launch. Check out the Vlada, A Dracula Tale Facebook page for more. As a Superman fan, have you ever wondered what would happen if a person who knew barely anything about comics decided to absorb hundreds of Superman stories from all eras and media? Robbo is that kind of person, and that's exactly what he's done on a new show called This Podcast Will Never Die. The first season, called Superman Will Never Die, starts with the unexpected ways the Man of Steel stood out from the pulp heroes on the newsstands in 1938. Listen and subscribe to This Podcast Will Never Die, and you'll never look at Superman's trunks the same way again. We all love the big-budget superhero films, but the world of independent cinema remains a place of unbridled creative freedom and entrepreneurial spirit. Whether you're an independent filmmaker yourself, or you just love movies, don't miss these New Jersey film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, and Round Reel in Bloomfield. Submission information for filmmakers can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the festivals on social media for news about events, discounts, tickets, and much more. Fat Moose Comics, established in 1982, is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Led by current owner Sean Hendricks, Moose has that rare, old-school comic shop feel and camaraderie, yet also remains a welcoming space for new fans. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you are in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Yeah, right on. All right. So, thus far, I feel like we've been pretty similarly aligned in terms of our view. Here is now where we split. So we get into the Action Comics run. So I want to mention some quotes that I pulled from those CBR interviews. So this is one that he did in July 2003. So a good few months before his run actually started, and was asked about how the run came to be. And Austen said, Eddie Berganza asked me. He asked me a lot. I kept saying no, and he kept sweetening the deal, not financially, but from the standpoint that I could make fundamental changes to the character to make him more interesting to me. I'm going to stop here for a second. There's a lesson I learned hosting this podcast. I learned it long ago, and it has served me well. It's rare that it happens, but from time to time, I'll reach out to a potential guest about doing an episode, and I've learned that if the guest has any reticence I just move on. I say, no problem. We keep it. And it's perfectly fine. And I want them to tell me that, right? Like, I don't want someone who has nothing to say about something, but they just want to be on the show. So they're like, oh, sure, I'll do it. I want people who have, some history with the work or some take or some perspective, something, right? And like I said, it's rare, but sometimes people will be like, oh, like this doesn't really speak to me. I don't really have any. And I appreciate that. Like, I want that. And I've learned when I get a response like that, don't push it. Don't twist anyone's arm to do it. So all that to say, maybe when Eddie Berganza asked multiple times, maybe move on at that point. It would have broken your heart, but maybe it would have been for the best. All right.
Well, I mean, again, I didn't read the Action Comics run at the time, so it's not like I followed Joe Kelly across the street. I didn't follow Chuck Austen.
Oh, so you didn't read this as it was coming out?
No, I read Metropolis because, again, I've loved Jimmy Olsen, but no, this I may have read a couple of the Magog issues, but no, the whole thing I didn't read.
Oh, this is the first time.
In completion.
Oh.
Yeah. The Metropolis I read back in the day. I enjoyed that series very much, but I read sporadic issues with Magog, but the whole thing from beginning to end was just now. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I couldn't do it. I couldn't pick up another Superman book back in the day.
I see.
I had so few DC books on my pull list. This didn't do it.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll continue with the excerpts that I pulled. So what attracted Austen to the Superman comics? Initially, nothing, admits Austen. I thought he was fairly boring when I was a kid, so I never read them then, but I wrote a couple stories that were pretty much out of the box as far as DC was thinking, and it invigorated Eddie. So I'm assuming those are the fill-ins, right, that we talked about. Like that, Eddie had commissioned these stories, they went over well, and now he's being asked to do more. And so the editor asked him, if you were to write Superman, how would you handle it? And I did some research. I read tons of Superman stuff. And the only work that grabbed me was the original Siegel and Schuster material. My own emphasis I'll hit. The only work that grabbed me was the original Siegel and Schuster material. Brilliant in its charm and simplicity. I loved it.
Yeah.
But it also made me hate Lois. She was a horrid bitch. She was outright cruel to Clark and never gave him the time of day until she learned he was Superman. Talk about your original gold digger. Now, I'm going to jump from that to his post-mortem interview with CBR in February 2006, where CBR says, I think the term you used was gold-digging bitch, more or less. And Austen says, wow, I can't believe I actually said that somewhere, but I've said stranger things. Haha. That was me trying to be funny or making a joke, probably. I'm wont to be a smartass, you may have noticed, and it was a mistake to say that. So walk that back after the fact, after everything blew up. But at the time, that was his take. Look.
Do you think they should be married?
All right, so whether or not Lois and Clark should be married, whether or not they should be together, whether or not there should be another viable romantic path for the character, that's kind of I could go on and on about that.
Sure.
What I'll say is, generally speaking, yes, I am a proponent of Lois and Clark being together and her knowing the secret. Whether or not they're actually married, it's what I'm used to. I like it. I'm open to them just being in a long-term committed relationship. At the same time, look, there's a difference between, I feel like there are certain kind of immutable truths about the character that I'm like, no, it always has to be this. But there are other things where we've had so many different iterations, continuities, things like that, where I'm open-minded. For example, the New 52, the fact that they explored a Superman Wonder Woman romance. When I finally got to that material a couple of years ago, I quite enjoyed that. It's not my baseline. It's not my default. Yeah. If I could only have one version, it's not what I would want. But if we're going to be kind of exploring something a little different, I'm open.
Okay. I hate it when they're married. I do. Before the one exception to that I will say is when Tyler Hoechlin and his sons. I thought that was great. I really, really love Superman and Lois. But aside from that, it's like, to me, and I echo what Chuck Austen said, I think Siegel and Schuster is always the version that spoke to me the most. When I discovered it, I was like, oh, now I get it. Now I get why this character's been around for so long. But when they're married, I'm just like, well, I feel like you lost something. Because I feel like one of the reasons the character worked for so long through the old shows and radio shows and even in the DC animated universe from when we were kids, it's like, Superman wants Lois to look at Clark, and she doesn't. She wants to be with Superman. Superman is him, acting out. It's a love triangle. It's this beautiful thing. It's what your sitcoms do, right? Like How I Met Your Mother dragged this thing out for like 8 seasons. It's the same kind of thing. It's a trope, and it's a trope for a reason. It allows the story to go on. But once she allows herself to figure it out, once she takes a step back and say, oh, of course they're the same person. They've always been the same person. Then it's like, okay, well, that story's over. Well, what do I have left? I have a happily married couple. Well, that's great, but that's not very interesting. I love my wife. I don't think our day-to-day life would make very interesting stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons that so many people, even to this day, talk about how boring he is. Because even in the new trailer, he's talking to her about being Superman when he's not wearing the Superman costume. It's like, well, why do you even bother with a secret identity? He's got like one person he really cares about. It's like, just drop the whole thing altogether. Like, there's a reason he wears that costume. There's a reason he puts those glasses. I don't even like the Chris Reeve movies, and they make a point of doing this.
So, I mean,
I'm sorry. I've pulled us on a terrible tangent. I feel very bad.
It ties in with the Lana piece, and it is important. It's not that I see no value in him hiding his secret for a time or the triangle, but I feel like the mileage that you can get out of that is limited. And in all of these things that we've seen, like when I look at, like Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, I remember vividly getting to the point in season 2 when episode after episode, he's making up some lame excuse about why he has to sneak off. And it got to a point like something had to turn. So I guess it's not that I see no place for it ever, but then I want to get beyond that because I feel like that's when the stories get deeper. That's when you get to see a different side of the character. So that's ultimately where I land on that. But that leads us into the whole Lana piece of this. So this is from one of those pre-run interviews where, so the article says, Lana Lang is a character who saw some spotlight in recent years, but with her prime role in television Smallville, it seemed inevitable her star would rise. That said, the television show didn't dictate Austen's decision to include her. And he says, the idea was mine, actually. Or maybe it was Eddie's when I suggested another woman. I think it was actually a mutual thing between he and I. All right, so they're clearly looking to shake things up here. Yeah. The reaction to Lana Lang's inclusion included accusations that Austen was going to cause Superman to cheat on his wife. And then the quote says, people accuse me of a lot of things that have nothing to do with me, laughs Austen. As far as Lana is concerned, does anyone really think DC would let me get away with that? Well, maybe they would, laughs. Time will tell. Well, time did tell. And then we get to that post-mortem interview. Yeah. And look, this is actually an instance I'm gonna cut Austen a little slack here because I was curious about exactly what led to Lana making a play for Clark, essentially telling him she loves him. We'll talk about it even more specifically, but just to kind of lay this out. So, in fairness, I went back to some of the Joe Kelly issues that preceded Austen's run. And in Action Comics 800, which I know you're a fan of as well, that milestone.
Oh yeah,
it's great.
Absolutely.
I feel like it tweaks the post-crisis version of their relationship a little bit because typically post-crisis, the way it was really always depicted, at least my reading of it, was that Lana had these feelings for Clark. He saw her more in a sisterly way. I mean, if you look at like For All Seasons, especially that Martha short story that they did later, they went to prom together and stuff like that. But, and he's the one that he confides his secret in before he leaves Smallville, but she thinks he's going to propose marriage. Right. And instead he's like, I can do these things. I'm leaving. So it was always more, I felt like this crush that she had on him that wasn't really reciprocated. And I feel like in the post-crisis era in the comics, that's typically what we got. In Action 800, we see key moments in Clark's journey. And one of them is Clark and Lana at the train station as he's departing. And she asks him to stay, and he asks her to come with him. Right? So I feel like that's kind of an added layer there. And then they meet up in their travels. They intersect in Venice, I think. And once again, there's this thought of maybe it is going together.
Killing me that you said brother-sister relationship because I had the complete opposite read. It's like, I mean, again, I go back to Smallville. It's like he loved her.
Well, no. I'm saying in the comic specifically. Obviously, the Smallville show was very different, and of course.
But I think the Smallville one was being more truthful to the original, which was written for children. It's not like they could say, "Hey, we're going to sneak off and play with my abilities a little bit." But I think like he looked at her as any teenage boy would look at this woman and be like, No, I love you. I'm completely obsessed with you.
No, that's the thing. I think when you look at the pre-crisis comics, she was a contender.
Yeah,
right?
Oh yeah.
And when, yes, we look at Smallville or other media adaptations like Superman 3, the Superboy TV show, I'm not, that's something else.
Okay,
but
okay,
specifically like in this version of the comics that we're dealing with,
Sure.
that really wasn't the approach. But then again, Action Comics 800 puts that added layer to it. Then there's that Lost Hearts storyline that Joe Kelly and Jeff Johns.
We did an episode on that.
We did a Patreon episode on that years ago. And in that, early on in that story, this is when Pete's vice president and Lana has this whole bit about, I've been settling my whole life. Yeah. So it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. So clearly there's resentment. And then Clark and Lana are under the influence of these like demonic sorrow demons or whatever. I don't know, that feed on their sorrow.
The villain of the week. Yeah, whatever it is.
Yeah. And they end up sharing a kiss while they're under the influence of this. And then that story ends with the question of like, are Pete and Lana going to make it? And then flash forward a few issues later, there was that Supergirl centric storyline with the CRL Supergirl in Action Comics with CRL and Natasha Irons, and they were teaming up.
Tracy 13.
Yes, exactly. And that's when I think that was the first indication that Pete and Lana were getting a divorce because Lana, or at least were separating because Lana was getting an apartment in Metropolis. Yeah. I bring all of this up to say, in Austen's defense, I think there were some seeds that were planted that at least pointed towards her unhappiness with Pete, that she had settled for Pete, that there was something deeper between her and Clark. I don't think it necessarily pointed towards what Austen did, but there was something there. And actually to that point, so in this postmortem, defending what happened, Austen said, Lana was established as someone who was still having ambivalence about her feelings for Clark. She had gone through divorce from Pete, named her son after another man. I didn't write that stuff and had nothing to do with it, but I wanted to follow continuity. I was trying to instill, and this may come as a shock to people, but conflict is the basis of most good storytelling. So I just used what was there for me to turn it into something. Eddie and I had conversations where we discussed the situation, how I felt about Lois after reading hundreds of thousands of Superman comics, and come to the conclusion that I didn't particularly care for Lois, the character, as she had been portrayed. And then later he says, the whole thing with Lana was leading up to the strengthening of the Clark-Lois relationship, and we like to tease people, scaring them into thinking we might have Clark with Lana, but obviously DC is never going to let that happen. Sure. I mean, I call
that's how I read it. That's how I read it. I read it as you're going to introduce another woman, and it's not Wonder Woman. It's not Maxima. It's not, because he's not interested in all that. This is someone he's actually said, I love you to, and who may have been someone he went back to if he never met Lois. So when she shows up, and even Ma is like, Lois, you can be a bit much, honey.
Oh, I got problems with Ma in this as well.
Sure you do, but I loved it because it was this whole thing of like, you actually challenge the fundamental bedrock of that relationship. And they say it perfectly at that dinner scene where it's like, Lois, you hit the freaking jackpot here. It's like, but you're still going off and doing everything else. And maybe that's fine. Maybe Clark doesn't have a problem with it. I actually do believe that he doesn't have a problem with it, but he was also raised a certain way, and having these two women just being like, no, I want to support you. I'm here for you. Like, this is why, Martha followed Jonathan around. It rang true. But the entire time I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, wow, this is going to really strengthen Superman and Lois. So when he rolls off the book, hopefully Lana ends, again, in my head, she should end up with General Zod. But I really do think the Superman and Lois are going to be better and stronger because they're going to go through it. And Lois is going to be like, oh, you really do love me. It's not just someone who can love both sides of you. It's not just someone who can bridge that gap. It's like, no, Lois Lane, a girl reporter. It's like, you love me. And again, I go back to Superman Prime where he's like, it's always going to be you. You're the reason I hang around here.
I just don't think I can give Austen that benefit of the doubt that that's where he was going, because in order to make this quote unquote work to whatever extent it does, turns Lana into a homewrecker and makes Lois this like cold, frigid witch. And I felt like, he took advantage of the fact that over in Adventures of Superman, she was overseas reporting. She ends up getting shot. It's a huge storyline that is referenced at least a little bit in the Austen run. But so I feel like Lois had to be positioned that way in order to create this tension. I didn't feel like it was fair to Lois. I think one of the things that kind of annoys me is that
But why wasn't it fair to Lois? Because it's just giving Lois flaws. Like, Lois doesn't have any flaws. Her spelling is the big thing. but I'm serious. Like, you've read every series. You've read way more Superman comics than I have. It's like, this is good. I like seeing her jealous. I love that scene where they're like, oh, we're going to go play baseball. Great. Everyone runs out and suddenly it's stuck in there. It's like, you have interviewed Lex Luthor. You've interviewed presidential candidates. You've interviewed the head of Intergate. Like, you are not afraid of anything except your husband's ex-girlfriend. And I was like, this is great. These are character flaws. These do create conflict, and they allow you to show why you care about these characters, because the way they react to that conflict is character.
I guess for me, and I'm biased, but like, I love that Loeb Kelly era so much, and it preceded this pretty close in time. And I felt like Loeb and Kelly in particular, and Casey and Schultz, they did great work with Clark and Lois. And there was tension, like when Clark didn't save Sam Lane in Our Worlds at War. So it's not like she's perfect or he's perfect or that there's no conflict or that there can't be conflict. But this, I just felt like, Austen made a meal out of the fact that like Lois was off in another title and wasn't here. Yeah. And we kind of pinned a lot on that to make it seem like she's not there to support him.
But what's the difference between her being jealous of Lana and what Kelly would do when she is jealous of Wonder Woman? And even though Clark says repeatedly, I was never going to be with Diana. Diana is one of my best friends. It never even crossed my mind. I view this as the same thing. It's like, yeah, Lana would love for him to come around, but it never even occurred to me that Clark is looking at her. It's like, no way. I moved on. We're different people. I love this woman. I would have kids with her if I could.
No, I mean, I think the idea that Lois might feel some sort of way about Clark having a close friendship with the woman that he had a romantic past with, I'm okay with that. Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's not so much the core ideas here. It's the way they come and just kind of how blatant Lana is with all of it. I felt like it just did her. Like that's actually Clark out of everyone I felt behaved correctly. Cause when Lana is putting all this out there, he's like, I think you need to go. And he flies away.
Yeah.
He did the right thing. Yeah. But I just feel like it was unfair I just felt like a lot was pinned on Lois, that she's not there. She doesn't support him.
Sure.
And that Lana just was like way over the top. But the idea, and so kind of on that note, I want to talk about one of our audience members.
Cool.
Lorenzo. Lorenzo, I think, is a listener of a lot of the Superman podcasts. He writes in, he calls into the shows, and he signs every message Klana forever and always. So he is as big a Lana and Clark and Lana fan as I've ever met. And that I think is probably out there. So much so that we did our hot takes episode a while back, and his were the hottest of hot. I mean, they were like on fire. Talk about ranking the Superman movies, right? Superman 3 is his number one.
Oh, cool.
Right? So that, and like one of his favorite, if not favorite episodes of Smallville is Requiem, where Lana is infected with the kryptonite and they can't be together, that whole thing. Okay. So he's got a very specific view on this. And it's funny, we've had wonderful email exchanges recently. But I got to the point where I said to myself, well, why don't I ask what it is about Lana that speaks to him so much, as opposed to us being like, oh, Lorenzo, those hot takes. It's like, no, but what is it? So I asked him, and he said, and it was fascinating how this unfolded, because after he said this, I was like, have you read the Austen run? And he hadn't. Yeah. And then he did. Because this is what he said when I was like, what is it about Lana? He goes, most Superman fans would agree that Smallville and the Kents are the most crucial part of why Clark is the person he is. It always made sense to me that the person he'd fall in love with would also be someone who represents that, the small town girl next door with whom he grew up, who knew him just as Clark long before Flights and Tights. Yeah. And then he cites Superman and Lois and Smallville and Dawson's Creek, and he made a bunch of connection points. He says, I want to limit how much I turn this into an anti-Lois sentiment, but Lois is a character who in far too many interpretations I find to be overly abrasive and not particularly kind. And it's always been difficult for me to fathom the notion that Clark, being the embodiment of kindness, would fall for someone like that. As Superman, Clark tries to make time for everyone, whereas in many iterations of the mythos, Lois won't even make time for Clark. Yeah. And it so struck me because that's exactly what Lana articulates to Clark. Yeah. So getting back to this run here that we're talking about, the first few issues here, because I want to really zero in on this Lana issue. I think it's the most interesting, but we kick off, again, these are real brisk. These are not dense issues at all. Yeah. Austen, in that one of those interviews, he even made a joke about how, the letterer is so happy. There's only like 30 words in the whole thing. It's like, I don't know if that's something to brag about, but all right.
It's about what you do. It's about action.
It is that here for sure. But in the first issue, we have Superman fighting Calabac and the hordes of Apocalypse. They've come to Earth because they've lost Doomsday. They've been in possession of Doomsday and they lost him.
Yeah.
There's also the bit of business in this where Clark has been demoted at the planet, and Lois knew about it but didn't tell him, and they kind of play phone tag, and clearly she's trying to avoid him and all of that. Then we get a couple of issues where Gog attacks Smallville. We have Superboy and the Teen Titans in the mix, so a couple of just slugfest issues. And then Superman gets stabbed like multiple times with his staff. And then we get a couple of issues where Superman is laid up in Star Labs, and then all of the supervillains converge to try to take their moment. And Wonder Woman is there to help defend. So, I mean, really like those first handful of issues, very action-packed against Calabac, Gog, and this horde of supervillains. And then at the end of that, Superman passes out. They need someone to care for him as he recuperates because he was injected with like liquid kryptonite and he's out of it. That's where Lana enters the picture. In those first few issues, though, what stood out to you? What do you want to talk about with those?
Oh, the introduction of Gog. I thought that was great. Yeah, I mean, Magog is the villain in Kingdom Come. He's a character who's supposed to be introduced in the future, and then the Kingdom sequel points out that he will be trained by a character named Gog. These are vague biblical allusions. So seeing that character, having him show up, and then having him be introduced as the child of parents that Superman was unable to save. They were just bystanders in a tragedy, and then watch his future self arrive and say, I got it. I figured it out. I nailed this liquid kryptonite thing. We're going to take him out. And if this doesn't work, I'm going to come back again and again and again. I thought that was great. I thought it really established a personal connection. It showed how crazy this guy could be. And I thought it was the best way to segue into Kingdom Come, which I always hoped would be the actual DC future.
So, and not just any tragedy, Our World's at War. Like he's the kid, Caleb, in Superman 172, who Superman rescues. And we talked about that kid and that scene when we did Our World's at War, where the kid's scared and Superman's like, I get scared sometimes too, but if you be brave, I'll be brave too. I mean, not to be nitpicky, but in a subsequent issue of the Loeb Superman title, we follow up with the kid. He's living with relatives. He's okay. He writes Superman a letter, but okay. But here the take is that this kid, Caleb, whose parents were killed during the Imperiex strike of Topeka, Kansas, and Our World's at War, that he grows up and his quest is, and we don't get this backstory until deeper into the run, but we'll just include it here because this is when we meet this version of Gog. By the way, over the years doing this podcast, it's like every time, I wish I could just retain all of this because every time we encounter a Gog or a Magog, I'm like, God damn, all right. Because, Kingdom Come, we have Magog and there's reference to Gog. Then in The Kingdom, by Mark Waid, right? That series that introduced Hypertime. We get Gog, who was this lone survivor of the Kansas explosion, who worships Superman and then is disabused of the notion that he's a god and he turns on him. Then we get this version. Anyway. And then the Thy Kingdom Come storyline and JSA will give us yet another. Anyway.
And then there's a new origin for Magog right now in current continuity.
Yes. Yeah, from the World's Finest title. Anyway,
it never ends.
But this version, to my knowledge, doesn't exist outside of this storyline here. But yeah, so he's this kid, Caleb. So, it was a kind of an interesting play on the same type of idea from The Kingdom, right? There's this kid who survived, right? And now has turned evil.
Has turned evil because he's like focused on it. And he's become the inverse of Batman. He's like, it's if Superman could just have saved him. And, a normal person maybe eventually would have realized, well, he did everything he could. And then, this kid grows into Gog because he just can't get over it. And even, at the very end of the run, the fill-in issue, so it's not Austen, but he even says like, eventually I realized I was a crazy person, but by then I was committed to this whole thing. So I thought that was a very natural evolution of like someone who survived trauma that there was no recourse for, and then eventually grew into this terrible thing, and unfortunately had the ability to inflict damage upon the person he blamed, even though that person was blameless. Yeah, well, that's the thing, because at first he wants to change time. He wants to save his parents, but he can never go back further than when he had the idea to do this. So he could never save his parents. So then that morphed into this quest for revenge. Fixed point in time. Yeah, that's right. But no, I was on board with this version of Gog and tying into Our World's at War and all that. And interestingly, in the one of those backup stories that preceded Action 814, where Austen was starting to set this stuff up, we see young Caleb in the immediate aftermath, and he's telling all the paramedics and police, it's like, Superman told me he's going to find my parents.
And they're all talking like, Superman would never say that. Like, that's crazy. And I even went back and I double checked Superman 172. It's like, he did not.
No, he didn't. No.
But that's in this child's mind. And then he's visited by his future self who bestows him with this power. So
did we talk about the other backup one, the one with Lana?
Well, I think we should save it. Well, when we get to the big Lana issue, we'll hit on that there. But yeah, I mean, so that version of Gog. Now, I guess the other really big thing, I think, that applies to the whole run, but especially I feel like these early issues is, and I was alluding to this earlier, the characterization of Superman, the voice. I guess, how did this play? It sounds like it played well for you, the kind of more brash, quippier version.
I liked it. I really did. I like that he sounded more like a normal person. But again, I'm the first person to admit that I don't have like your nostalgia for what we grew up with. Like, I never had it. I never got it. So hearing this one was like, oh, I like this. But when people who do love the Superman who was around at the time say they don't, I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense because it doesn't sound like that. I mean, now that I know it's Siegel and Schuster, it's like, oh, it absolutely sounds like that, but that would have been our grandparents. So it landed for me, but it landed for me because of how different and abrasive it was compared to everything else that was coming out at the time.
So just for some examples here, so Superman stops a train robbery early on, and he tells one of the guys, I'll give that gun a guided tour of your intestines. There's reference to him being bulletproof. And he's like, yeah, I get Consumer Ratings, highest rating. Consumer Reports, highest rating. When Apocalypse attacks, he has a line to Steppenwolf because Steppenwolf tries to attack him and he goes, hello, indestructible. Yeah. And when Darkseid shows up, he's like, gosh, I guess I must not be expressing myself clearly. And he punches him. And when he's fighting Calabac, he's like, it's in the name Superman, as in I'm better than you are. Yeah. And that's just in the first issue.
That's great. Yeah.
So to me, this did not feel like the character. This felt more like Spider-Man. And I know Spider-Man is your favorite.
Oh, that would make sense.
And that's probably why you like it so much.
That's probably why I like it so much. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Here's the thing though. Look, I'm going to circle back to something that we share a deep love of. Well, I do love Spider-Man too, but Morrison New 52. Yeah. And they're rats with money. Yeah. Right. And he lands on the street. He's like, I'm doing your job for you. Yeah. Because I really do want to be clear about this. I'm not saying that he has to be stoic. I'm not saying that there can't be that brash attitude. Yeah. But I look at the Morrison stuff and I feel like, okay, yes, this is a brasher, more Golden Age-esque version, but it still felt true to the core. Whereas this quippiness just did not, and the violent threats, like that's where I just felt like, nah, this doesn't ring true to me. Yeah. And it was jarring. And it's where I even have to elevate Bendis, over this, because at least I felt like, all right, he got the voice of the character. I mean, I'm glad honestly, like I'm glad it worked for you. And I really do. I know you know this, but just for the record, it's like in no way, shape or form would I want you to come out of this being like, oh yeah, you were right. Like this run wasn't good. Like I'm so glad you like, I'm glad somebody liked this. Right. Lorenzo loved it too. I'll get to his take on that. But the voice just killed me. Yeah.
First of all, I want to make it very clear that I do not think that Chuck Austen is a good writer. I like stories. I like stories that he has written. I want to make this very clear. Grant Morrison, quite possibly the best superhero comic book writer of all time. They are not. They may be in the same industry. They are nowhere near the same level.
An hour and a half in, you've been singing the praises of all this Austen stuff, and now, but he's not a good writer.
No. I do like what he has written without a doubt, but I didn't find myself going through this the way I do with a Morrison story or a Garth Ennis story and being like, oh man, this is going to stick with me for the rest of his life. Like there's one thing of like enjoying it, and there's another thing of parsing it and saying, okay, I want to attend writing course this man is teaching. Like those are two very different things. Like yes, of course New 52 Superman was better. It was written by someone at the top of their field. Like I really, really enjoyed these, but at the same time, it's like I've also read a lot of Chuck Austen comics I wouldn't recommend. I mean, again, we're not an X-Men podcast, but if you ever want to do a Beyond Metropolis talking about that, I guarantee it'll be your highest rated episode of all time.
I'll probably pass on that, but I appreciate the offer. But, look, there's another important point here that I do think is worth mentioning. Like, I've gotten you to talk about a lot of Superman stuff, and I love it, and I'm glad. And I know you have affinity for the character in these works that we've talked about, but it's not Spider-Man to you. Like, I get that, right? And so I understand that you're also coming at this from a more casual perspective, and I can only imagine that makes you more open to, to stuff like this. Whereas anything Superman related. Like I said, is it true to? And I have to check myself. Like I get that, so I do understand why with that kind of approach and craving kind of a different spin on the character, something more relatable, down to earth. Like I do understand that. But that was sort of my take, I guess, on that initial batch of issues. But then
when he, by the way, when he threatens the man's lower intestine, it's over the top. It's ridiculous, whatever. But it is because the guy has said, I'm going to test your bulletproof. And he says, if a ricochet, because they're in a subway car, they're in a commuter rail. So he's very specific about that. He's like, if a ricochet hurts anyone on this car, like anyone at all, that, and then he says the line, but he's not just Arnold Schwarzenegger offering that up. It's very specific of like, I am bulletproof and I don't want you to hurt anyone else. And if you shoot me, it's going to ricochet off. And if I miss grabbing it, like, then he says the line. So again, it's this idea of like the threat is purposeful because there are innocents in danger. Fair.
And so like we said, Superman's laid up. They need someone to care for him. Wonder Woman and Connor are talking about like, well, who else could do it? And then of course, what about Mom and Pop? But anyway, Lana shows up, right? And then we end that issue 818, and then we get into 819, which is the most Lana-centric issue. You know what's funny, though? I think it's such a standout, for better or worse, aspect of this run, and I feel like the Lana piece is probably what gets cited most when people, and I don't know how often people are talking about this run, but when people do, I feel like it's the Lana. Going into this, I was expecting a lot more Lana. It's really not a ton.
Yeah.
What we get gives us a lot to talk about, but I guess in my head, I really had built this up as being like a bigger part of it than it actually was. So, but anyway, so we have this issue of her caring for him and them having these conversations. But to your point, one of those backup stories that Austen did before is, they were like 6 pages or whatever, but it's Lana and baby Clark at the Kent farm talking to Jonathan and Martha about her impending divorce from Pete and how he's trying to get sole custody and all that. So yeah, what did you make of this?
Oh, I thought that was great. Yeah, I thought it was a nice reintroduction for Lana Lang. Because again, just like Jimmy Olsen, I don't have a lot of post-crisis idea of what role they were supposed to serve. Without Superboy, without these defined relationships, it's like, well, what are you doing? You're floating around like a Power Girl. So I love that story because as she's talking to Martha, and Martha's saying, "Oh, I remember the first time you met. You were in preschool. Clark was scared. You were fearless." Again, parallel with Lois. You went and you grabbed him, and you were off to the races. And then Lana says something that's like, "Oh, but I know Clark can always hear me." And then later on in the last page of the story, you can see that her text is being written so that she's whispering because she's like, "I know Clark. I know Superman. I know he's always listening in on this farm. So if I whisper, I can have a degree of secrecy when I speak to you." And that just said to me like, oh yeah, you have consideration for him. You're not just obsessed with what got away. You know him as a person, you respect him, and you love him. Like, I just thought it worked on multiple levels. And just that very tiny thing of like, I know you well enough that your powers are just part of how you exist in my head and my heart. I can whisper here to your mother, who I have known almost as long as you have. And that's the beginning of the relationship. And my God, Martha Kent is looking at baby Clark, and you gotta be thinking like, she wants it's like she wants grandkids, right? And the reveal that you had that other story was supposed to be about a miscarriage. It's like, how much of that would have played in where it's just like, well, Clark Ross the second or whatever is sitting right here, and she's looking at it like, my God, I want to fill this farm up with healthy young alien hybrids.
Yeah, this first backup, it's not like I found it terribly offensive, but I didn't love the Kents in this so much. I mean, even Martha from the jump, like, oh, I thought you and Clark would get together. And then when she talks about moving to Metropolis, she's like, I know, and you'll be close to Clark. And then Pa, he's like, I hope I'm not overstepping, but like, are you leaving P because you're in love with Clark? I know they have a close relationship and they have a lot of history, but I guess in this interaction here, and then when we get to everything Lana does in 819, I'm just, kind of imagining how this would play out in like a real world scenario. Like, it's so inappropriate.
Yeah.
So I even the Kents were grinding my gears in this, but
they've known,
I know
of them, they've known each other forever. They only see Lois on holidays and everything else. And I'm sure they have a very nice relationship, but she's a military brat who loves the largest city in the world. This is Lana. Lana basically lived on this farm. When she's sitting there, she's basically family. And they had to, for the longest time, coming from a small town, they were probably like, oh, well, these two are going to get married and we're going to have a ceremony out back and they're going to live on the farm down the road and we're going to have a ton of grandkids and this is going to be amazing. We're going to continue this rich tradition. And then they remembered, oh, no, wait a second. We saved Moses from the basket. He's got to go out and free everyone from injustice. So, of course, he leaves, and unfortunately, he left Lana too. But it's like they must have thought, like, this is our daughter-in-law.
Yeah, but it's like at that point, you got to get past that. You got to get over that. And I feel like they had. Like, that's why with the Lana piece here, I'm going to use another television show that I'm sure you haven't seen, Modern Family.
A little bit. I love Ed O'Neill a little bit.
So there's a great bit in one of the episodes where like the Dunphy car is rolling down the hill and Phil jumps on the hood of it. And Claire, the wife, is like, "What's the plan, Phil?"
Yeah.
And I kind of had that feeling with the Lana of it all in this, where going back to what we were saying before, right? Like, because I do want to be clear. I look at something like Superman 3. Like, Lana was the highlight of that movie. I was invested in that relationship. It bummed me out that she gets the job at the Planet at the end and then she's gone from 4. It's like, that would have been interesting. Annette O'Toole, yeah.
Okay.
Right? On Superman and Lois, not that I wanted Clark to have an affair with Lana, but I always wished that they had done like a what if episode. If they had shown us, or an alternate reality or something, like what if Clark had stayed in Smallville and you got to see the two of them? Because that would have been great to see them in that kind of mode. Going back to the New 52, obviously they went the Superman Wonder Woman route, but the New 52 could have been a cool opportunity to explore what a modern day relationship between Clark and Lana is like. The Superboy TV show, I've talked about this. Like if that show had gotten a crisis moment in the Arrowverse event, I would have wanted Clark to be with Lana and not Lois because of that version of the show and that dynamic that they presented. However, if you're going to entertain that, if you're going to have any sort of triangle with those characters, the time to do it isn't almost a decade after they've been married in the comics. And that's why I go back to what's the plan here, Chuck? Because this just feels like a dead end. And because it's like Clark can't cheat, right? Lana already is acting like a homewrecker. Like no one comes off good in this, and as much as he says, "Oh, this was ultimately going to strengthen the relationship," maybe, but I'm having a hard time based on what we got, seeing what the plan and hearing all of his comments too about this. It's like, come on.
No, first of all, you're taking the bait. You're taking the bait. You are absolutely taking the bait because this is what he wanted. You're engaging with the story. This is it. This is what he wanted. I mean, I assume he read all the terrible comments we all like put on there, but this is what he wanted. And it's like, but you're not following it from an emotional point of view. Lana didn't wake up and say, "How can I prove my station?" She woke up and said, I've had a lot of traumatic events. I lived in the White House for a little bit. Like I have to take a step back like an alcoholic would and be like, what do I have left? And it's like, oh, wait, I'm still in love with Clark. I am. I have to admit that to myself. And then she pursues it. And you keep calling her a homewrecker, but it's like it's not like she takes advantage of him. She just is open and honest with him. And when he says things like this is inappropriate and leaves, she doesn't disagree with him. Again, she's not saying like, this has to happen. I want this to happen. She's just saying, like, I've known you decades and I want to be honest with you because I just went through this unimaginable, terrible stuff up into including lost hearts. That was really, really bad on her. And I like the fact that she came out of all of that instead of being like, you know what, I'm done with all this nonsense. They could have went the Frank Miller route and had her be the one to give up the secret identity to some big villain, right? Like that's what they would have done if this was the late Bronze Age. And instead they said, wait a second, she's an adult. She loves her. She even says it. She says, all I want to do is have a safe environment for my son. And it's like emotionally, all these characters are acting like adults. It never even occurred to me reading this that Clark was thinking about it. But someone who knows him that well, he did look at Lois and he said, well, I don't love you any less, but again, this has an impact and how am I going to process it? And maybe if the book had run another year, again, would he have teased that? Would there have been would there have been a cliffhanger where it seemed like he was going in for a kiss? Of course there would have been. Why wouldn't there have been that? I'm sure there was in the 50s when they used to do these love triangles. But again, I think at the end of the run, it would have been like, no, it's you, Lois Lane. It's always been you, Lois Lane. And again, I hope Lana would have found love with someone else. Again, my vote is for General Zod, but I don't think anyone else wants that.
Well, I mean, in terms of what she actually does, like let's talk more about that. So sure. in 819, right, she's caring for Clark, and then he passes out, right, and she gets her lips as close to his lips as they can be.
Yeah.
And then we cut away. But I mean, I have to assume she planted one on him. A gentle peck. I
mean, yeah, maybe on like his forehead or something.
Sure, okay.
I mean, again, they've just.
Well, it was all right. It was more lip to lip. But
maybe you're right.
And then the next bit is he's been undressed, right?
Yeah.
And so she teases, and look, they have a long history and all of that. And so she's teasing him about how he got undressed. Yeah, fair enough.
So funny.
Right. And leads him first to believe like it was, and she even says like, it's nothing I haven't seen before, which is interesting too. And this is what I'm saying. Again, in fairness to Chuck Austen, I do think when you look at those Kelly issues that we cited, I think the take at that point is that there was a more involved past with them, like than we had seen before, which is, fair. And then she revealed, no, it was actually Jonathan and Martha who came. And
of course it was.
A great bit there where he's like, I don't know, it makes me more uncomfortable. Like the thought that it was you or my mom.
Yeah.
But then, she's standing there, the low cut jeans with the, you see her underwear coming up and talking about how like she wouldn't even be able to trust herself, like undressing him. Right. Okay. So a little flirtier than look, I feel she's overstepping even at that point. I feel
joking. Wait a second. Hold on. She knows this guy. She knows that he's an emotional stalwart, that he's constantly walking around. Think of the cardboard speech. She knows him inside. She's got the rare opportunity where the strongest man who has ever lived is bedridden because someone broke the space-time barrier to stab him in the gut. She is messing with him. Don't even start with that. She is messing with him. The joke starts.
Oh yeah, no, fair enough. No, I agree. But I feel like even that line of joking it's out of bounds.
They're friends. They've known each other like 20, 30 years. They were intimate with each other. And I don't think for a second that anyone even thought anything was going to happen. I don't think she was going for it. I don't think she'd want to break up the relationship. I think she was hoping that one day he would wake up and say, oh, I'm really not happy with her. End their relationship just like he had and say, listen, let's pick up where we left off. But the flaw in Lana is that she doesn't understand that's never going to happen. Clark outgrew Smallville. He belongs to the rest of the world. That's why he landed in Metropolis. He didn't go to Metropolis because Lois was there. He went to Metropolis because it's the center of the world. And Lois already was there. Like, that's the tragedy of Lana, is that Clark will always outgrow Smallville, and Lana is Smallville. It's why she was created narratively. It's why she exists. In our beloved show, she gets no great third act because they know she has to end up with Lois. It is a tragedy, but it's the truth of the character.
I do think that there is a degree of acceptance, especially when we get to that third scene with them in that issue where they're talking in the kitchen. And I agree with you. I don't think that she's necessarily thinking like, oh, she's going to make an outright move on him now, or that he's going to leave Lois for her in that instant. Yet at the same time, it is, as we're talking about this, it's like it is also colored by the fact that her panties mysteriously end up in Lois's stuff.
Yeah.
And she's there at the Kent house to celebrate the holiday, even though she clearly knows her presence there is causing tension for Clark. And yes, longtime family friend, and she was invited. Yeah. I get that. But at the same time, she's knowingly inserting herself. And then this is such a minor thing. This is jumping ahead to one of the later issues. But after the Repo Man attacks them on the farm, and then Superman checks on the women, and he's like, "Are you all okay?" And both Lana and Martha,
all three of them
said, "Don't worry, hun."
Yeah.
It's like, come on. No, so like that's what I'm saying. That I'm with you to a point, but I do disagree because I feel like there is, and what bothers me is that I think there's a version of this where no, she accepts this, but she has to convey this truth to him, but it's done in a more mature way. And then we don't have, because I feel like there's a lot of immature behavior that we're seeing from her.
Sure.
And like, here's the thing too, the bit about like, if the Lana from Superman and Lois, if there had been a similar type of situation where she was teasing him about, oh, I undressed you, but that would be a different story because that was such a like mature, evolved take on their relationship. But here it's not that. And so that's why it grates on me a bit. But this is the point where they're having this conversation. And also in you know, to your credit and in defense of the story, it's not like she like launches into an attack on Lois, but there's a little bit of back and forth. I forget all of the lines that kind of lead up to it, but I guess Clark at a certain point says like, you don't like Lois very much.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. And what does she say? Like, I don't not like her or something like that.
Well, she says, I don't understand why you like her. Because again, the version of Clark that exists to
Right.
Lana stopped existing when he got on that train, and everything else that's happened is just like, oh, real missing.
Right.
You know, that's how I take her flaw. Is like, why do you like her? Why do you like her? And eventually Clark should have said something like, because I had a life after I left you, and you know, and I invited you to come on the train with me or whatever, whatever it is. But it's like, I had this great, big, beautiful life, and I met someone who could keep up with me, who wasn't intimidated by a man who could, you know, land the space shuttle with his 2 arms. She went up to me and was like, give me all your details and everything else. It's like, that's awesome. And they fell in love, and they've been in love for 85 years. So,
yeah. But this is where she explicitly articulates that idea that Lorenzo had shared about. She says, I fell in love with the boy from Smallville.
yeah.
Lois fell in love with Superman and settled for Clark Kent.
Yeah,
Essentially just the way I settled for Pete Ross.
Yeah.
Which is her perspective, and obviously one that, like, you know, an audience member here, you know, expressed as well. And in and of itself, the idea that there is something, I'm not saying that makes her a better romantic interest for that reason, but there is still, I think, a compelling notion there that because of that history, she knew him in the time before, that there's something to that. Like, I think that's undeniable.
I agree with what she said, because again, this is what I was trying to say at the beginning of this particular conversation, where I asked you your opinion on the marriage, because I'm a huge fan of that love triangle, and I like that line, because when you collapse the love triangle, that's exactly what happened. I mean, and go back to All-Star Superman, when she's like, you're messing with me, you're messing with me, you're messing with me. It's the same thing where it's like, settled for Clark, because again, in Lana's mind, Clark is who she knew, and that's it. But Clark is much broader than that. You know, he had all these experiences Lana never did. So, you know, it's one of these things where you're not wrong, and I agree with you, but at the same time, like, you are commenting on something that you don't know as well as the two people involved. So I buy that she would say that,
right?
But I also think she's, you know, not 100%. So
yeah, okay, yeah, no, that's fair enough. And what's interesting too is that, you know, whether or not she's quote unquote right, I think if you like, clearly those Golden Age comics were so formative for Chuck Austen, and yes, I do feel like historically, especially in the pre-crisis comics, it was very much that idea. And there was more evolution when you got to the Bronze Age, but I feel like still this notion of this infatuation with Superman and being very dismissive of the meek, mild Clark. I guess, and I don't mean to belabor this point, but it's like, if this, you know, what's funny, if this were Earth One or like its own imprint thing, it's like, okay, then I would still have problems, but I would have an easier time divorcing it from everything. But I think it's that, no, this is Action Comics, like in the midst of all of these stories that we've read, where I just don't feel like that's a fair read. Now, to your point, Lana just might have, you know, a bad take on this, just based on what she has. Like, that's fine. And she even says, like, you asked me, right? It's not like she forced the issue, but like they're having this conversation. And he flat out says, like, you don't like Lois, right? Because I guess it starts with the idea about children. I think she asks, like, are you going to have children? And then he talks about how, you know, uncertain that is. And, you know, it kind of goes from there. But it's not like she forces the issue. And she says to him, like, you know, I want to be honest. And I know you have a hard time with honesty. Like, you know, fair. So like, that's what I'm saying. There are aspects of this that I'm okay with, but it's just kind of coupled with the full picture of her behavior. I just don't like the way it treats her. I feel like she deserves better than that. And also colored by the fact that, you know, you see what, you know, in the comics now, she just married John Henry Irons, right? Like, they've got a great new path for her. Nice. And Superman and Lois gave a great take on Clark and Lana as having a mature friendship, on Lana and Lois having a friendship. It's just like, I feel like it's to pit them against each other like that is, and that's the thing, right? Like, Austen's resurrecting this decades old love triangle that I just don't know that there was a place for in this way at this time.
Okay.
And then, you know, and it's tough too. I mean, I guess it's Austen's final issue before J.D. Finn, when they're regrouping at the farm after the attack by Repo Man. And that's when Martha has her big moment that just squashes this whole storyline where she's like, Lois, you don't know, you take Clark for granted. Like, you're not always as supportive as you should be. Lana, you had your chance, move on. And that's it. And, you know, that's where I have to wonder, even though Austen wrote that issue, like, I wonder if that was editorial being like, okay, like, just end this.
Or him, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I really do think he was aware of all of this stuff. So maybe he was like, if people aren't feeling this, like, this is a pretty good gig. I'll move on to something else,
Yeah.
And then, the other thing I just want to say is one of the themes that he has, going back to the child cancer award and all this stuff is like, Austen harps on a very key part of Superman storytelling, which is, you can hurt him physically, but that takes a lot of time, but you can hurt him emotionally because no one cares like Clark Kent. So I love all these little bits because it's like, he's going to go out there and he's going to stop armed muggers and he's Doomsday and the Fourth World guys, and he's going to punch all of them and it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be rendered by great artists. But to actually hurt him, again, you got to go that Peter Parker route. Like, he's going to stop the lizard, but he's going to come home and a loved one's going to be lying in a deathbed. It's the same thing here. It's like he can go out and he can fight Calabac. When he comes home, the first person he ever loved is going to be like, I don't know if you really love your wife. And he's going to be at a very low point and go, well, she knows me really well. Is there any whatever to this? And he's going to be hurt and he's going to be conflicted and he's going to be annoyed. Again, I ultimately think he says, well, no, I do love my wife, even if I had to think about it again. But again, that's how you hurt the man of tomorrow. You hurt him emotionally, right? All my powers, I couldn't save him. Like, you hurt him emotionally. That's always been the way to get through the S, so to speak.
Yeah. Right after that is an issue I imagine you enjoyed that featured the Creeper and Silver Banshee. Did you like that one or not so much?
Silver Banshee. Oh man, I don't even remember that one. I'm so sorry.
It had guest art. No, it's okay. It's Silver Banshee. She inhabits the body of a worker at the Daily Planet who's like really kind of OCD and craves order. And Silver Banshee craves fear. And so they sort of, it's kind of a good match because by killing people, it creates order because we're getting rid of these chaotic beings and they're so fearful in their moment of death that Silver Banshee feeds off of it.
Oh, okay.
And then Creeper gets involved and then Superman just like uses his breath at the end and freezes everybody. But
I think whenever Silver Banshee shows up, my brain goes blue screen.
Fair enough.
Because I'm so uninterested in her as a character.
Fair enough. But so as we barrel towards the climax of this run, and really we only have a couple of Austen issues left here, but the villain Prius. Yeah. I believe it's Prius or Prius. I don't know. I mean, Prius is, I'm thinking of the car.
Didn't Chloe Sullivan have a Prius? Yaris.
Yeah, there was a lot.
Yaris,
Yeah, there were a lot of car
Yaris.
product placement.
Yeah.
But this villain from the Godfall storyline, who is this Kandorian supremacist in the Bottle City, makes his way to
Michael
Earth.
Turner, right?
Yeah. Joe Kelly and Michael Turner co-wrote it. It was the Aspen crew, did the art, Talon Caldwell. Yeah, it was good.
It was great, yeah.
Yeah, that was a fun one. But so he makes his way to Earth and links up with these white supremacists, right? And very dark, ugly side of all of this. Yeah. And it's, that one issue was sort of, I don't know. That was the one bit that really connected to that Adventures of Superman run where Lois is. So we see in the pages of Action Comics, Superman at the side of Lois after she's been shot. So that's kind of that piece of it. And then we have Prius doing his business, and then Martian Manhunter intervenes. Yeah. It's nebulous to what extent Superman knows what's going on, if he directly sent Martian Manhunter or whatever the case may be. But Prius very quickly gets the better of him. Any thoughts on this villain?
I was super confused by that storyline for a couple of reasons. One, I'm still not 100% sure what Prius actually does to take out Jean. Like,
I don't know.
He shoots him with what appear to be like dark energy beams out of his eyes, and then John is immediately laid out. And it's like, you think we're going to see a further explanation for that. We never do. And then the other thing is later on, Jean realizes how to beat him. So he tells Superman to tear his chest plate off. And then that gives him cardiac arrest. And then Prius is just out.
Yes.
And I was wildly confused, and I did not have time to reread Godfall. I didn't know if this was a callback to something. And then immediately they get involved with all the Magog stuff. So I was just like, I'm leaving this. Anthony will explain this to me.
It's fine. I don't really have an explanation.
Okay.
We covered Godfall a few years ago now. I skimmed through it quickly. I might be just not remembering this, but I don't think there was a direct explanation of the powers or anything like that. But
I will say one of the things that I really didn't like about Austen's X-Men run is he is one of the people who didn't understand or didn't appreciate or whatever the Magneto, Zorn, Cassandra Nova, Ernst thing that Morrison was setting up. And I don't know if Morrison ever even bothered telling his editors, But Austen was like, oh, cool, I'm going to play with these characters. And then another editor had to come in and be like, oh, man, you screwed up the Scotsman's long-term plans. So that kind of felt like this. Like I was reading this and I was like, is this actually Prius? Or did you just look at the Michael Turner covers and do what I did and just kind of insert him? So when he showed up, I was like, this is a sequel to a story I barely remember. I'm just going to kind of go on to the next thing.
Yeah. I mean, an exceedingly dark moment where he essentially rapes a woman to death. I mean, it's incredibly dark. Then we get this two-parter with the Repo Man, right? This guy who Gog bestows powers upon, and he can shapeshift, and I don't know, but he tries to take Pa Kent's truck, and that leads to this like 2-issue slugfest with Repo Man.
Yeah. And Connor, it was nice to see the kid back.
And the kid was there, and that's the end of the actual Chuck Austen written issues, and then we have these two final issues where we have the final confrontation with Prius, like you had been referencing, where he rips off the plate and Prius is going to die, but Superman's going to take him to save him because he won't let anybody die. And that's when Gog makes his move, right? And you find out essentially that Repo Man, right? I don't know to what extent he was manipulating Prius. We don't really get that backstory, but it seems like a lot of this was orchestrated by Gog to attack Superman at a particularly weak
Doomsday
moment.
As well, who's been circling the run since the first issue. And
but Doomsday proves to be the big X factor, because I think what Gog says, I guess he had accounted for Doomsday, but not for Doomsday's acquired intellect. Yeah. And Doomsday ends up siding with Superman and has this whole turn, which was kind of a whole wild piece of this. But we could talk about the final conclusion here, but as far as what happened here. So this was from that post-mortem interview where he's asked, essentially why he didn't write those last couple issues here. So let's see. Well, the question was who J.D. Finn was. And so Austen said, I think Eddie Berganza is J.D. Finn. Maybe, that's a guess. I had a completely different ending in mind, one that left Gog a major villain. And I mean, let's be honest, I was ashamed of this initially, but let's just get this out there. I was fired and blackballed from DC. I was off Superman, period. It became complicated very quickly from there. I was given the option of finishing the final issue of the arc I had begun, but being suddenly and very unexpectedly unemployed, I needed to find work right away doing something else. I was given the option to still write for DC, but not on Superman or any other top or even mid-level character. I would have had to write under a pseudonym and take some lower-tier project like Prez or Blue Devil. That would have probably lasted an issue, and then I'd be out of comics anyway. I turned that down because I knew there were people who do like my work, and I didn't want to go out with 2 strikes against me. I wanted to have the opportunity for anyone who did like my work to find it. So I went back to a hectic animation job that left me no time to finish my final script in the week allotted, and they got J.D. Finn to do it. So my understanding, because I feel like I've heard different versions, I don't think they wanted him to write his final action issue under a pseudonym. I think it was that he could have gotten other work at DC on lower tier characters under a pseudonym. Yeah. But opted not to do that and to not write that final issue. And so then we got quote unquote J.D. Finn. And as far as why they fired him, he said they were having problems with my scripts and general direction, and sales weren't where they wanted them. They wanted a top 10 book and felt another writer could get them there when I couldn't. What I was told was that Dan DiDio had a conversation with various retailers who said they would never order anything with my name on it because they hated me so much, and that it was creating a ceiling of sales on action that I would never be able to break through. So I was off Superman. I refused to work under a pseudonym, so DC fired me and blacklisted me from the company. I took that as the opportunity to get out of comics.
Oh, yeah.
And so, we end up with these last couple of issues, and that climactic final issue, which is extra-sized issue where we get this final confrontation with Gog, and Superman loses. He's unable to defeat Gog or to save his loved ones, and he ends up imprisoned for hundreds of years, and he's already been growing older because of the kryptonite that he's been poisoned with.
It's basically like in his bloodstream in such a diluted amount, in such a weird amount that it is killing him and harming him and hurting him. And again, I in my mind, I thought like, oh, cool. This is also like reducing his, he can no longer fly faster than the speed of light. He's back in his golden age power set. But yeah, they kept drawing him with gray temples again, like in Kingdom Come.
Yeah. And he's prisoner for all of these years, but he doesn't give in to the temptation to go back in time, to sacrifice any life to undo what's been done, and ultimately inspires redemption in Gog and Doomsday. I mean, so Gog ends up going back in time and putting things right, essentially. And there's this like such a wild bit towards the very end where they're back on the Kent farm, and it's like Gog and Doomsday.
Yeah.
They're these redeemed villains there to kind of drop him off. So I don't know. I mean, just the notion that he wouldn't give in, again, felt very Joe Kelly-esque, felt very in keeping with that version. Gone was the quippy version of the character and all that. Yeah. So, but look, whoever J.D. Finn was, I think it was I wouldn't envy that job. Like that's a tough, I feel like that's a tough spot to be in. And I feel like, stuck the landing as best as one could in that situation.
I thought it stuck really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because again, those final issues, that last one especially, wraps up that entire thing. I mean, again, I would not be surprised if they collect the whole thing. Because if that's it, if that's the last issue you read, there's a period at the end of that sentence. So,
all right, a few more audience submissions here.
Well, one thing I did want to mention is you said the Doomsday coming around, and I really enjoyed that, because one of the complaints I've always had about the death of Superman, even when I was a little kid, was like, there's no character here. It's not Lex who kills him. It's not Brainiac. It's not Darkseid. It's just Doomsday. And while Doomsday is a visually interesting character, there's nothing there. He's a hurricane and moving towards Metropolis. So I like the idea that once you give him intelligence, and this was on the Justice League show as well, it's like, well, he's not dumb and he figures things out. Now, he's still evil, but he even says to Gog, it's like, well, no, I kill Superman. That's what I do. And I'm smart enough to know that. But, he's also as invulnerable and eternal as Superman. So when he's watching all of this over time, he's like, oh, I finally get it.
Yeah, he becomes part of the Superman army. He's wearing Superman underwear.
I thought that was great.
Yeah.
What better way of ending their relationship to say, oh, I finally get it. The guy I killed, the guy I'm known for murdering, I finally get why he's so important to everyone else. It takes 1,000 years, but I thought that was great. When he's wearing Superman branded trunks, I was like, I buy that. I absolutely buy that the murderer of Superman would, given enough time, one day come around. And then once Gog sees that, he's like, I'm done. All right, you win. I'm going to go back and put it all back to normal and then everything else goes back. And then, the next time he meets Doomsday, it's going to be like in the Jeff Loeb run, but that version of Doomsday exists in some branch of hyper time where he's like, I finally got it. I finally understand why everyone likes Superman.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, well, it's interesting. I have to double check the timing of this, but so we're past the Loeb, but then I feel like before the New 52, there was the Reign of the Doomsday storyline, which is still actually kind of a gap for me. I haven't read that. So yeah, I don't know exactly how we go from the Doomsday we have here to that Doomsday, but it was an interesting, I don't disagree. Like, it was an interesting take.
So when Darkseid shows up in the beginning to say we've lost Doomsday, that came after Michael Turner, Supergirl, Batman, Superman arc.
Yeah, that's a good question, because in that they have the Army of Doomsday.
That's what I was. Yeah, that's what I was making a reference to. Sorry. Yeah.
No, you're good. Yeah, no, you're good. They were pretty close in time.
They were.
Okay.
All
right. So a few more audience submissions. Martin Gray says, "Well, I've just read this lot for the first time since they came out, and it was a terrible experience. A total mess on the story front, full of underexplained plot points. It felt like I was reading a 2-series crossover, but only had half the story. For example, Ma Kent is hosting Christmas dinner a few days after a Halloween parade. Superman, apparently unaware Prius, is building a cult. By the time I got to Action 820, if Chuck Austen hadn't already annoyed the heck out of me with his writing of Lois and Lana, Lois an off-panel, barely presence who isn't supporting Clark, Lana a bad friend to Lois and Clark, awful wife to Pete, and careless with her smalls. I assume that means delicates.
Yeah.
Having Doomsday come in and squish a little kid was the straw that broke this reader's back. Children do not get murdered in Superman comics. Well, respectfully, though, we have a very famous Cat Grant Toyman storyline. I don't like to, don't get me wrong, I don't like to see it, but there are instances. Ma Kent was also written terribly. Random women were sexually available dopes. One, an apparently abused woman who couldn't wait to get together with someone she saw murder neighbors. I mean, that's going into the whole Prius business where the women were like volunteering themselves. I'd love to hear what women digging for Kryptonite listeners say about this. I would too.
Me too.
I would too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So the art was decent, but the best thing about this worthless run was the classic logo on the cover.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Don't worry. We're going to end with Lorenzo, who really loved this. Brian Dempsey says, I recall reading that first issue and stopping mid-story because Clark was off. He was flippant when he spoke. It was such a Spider-Man vibe to me. When you read or reread this, did you get that impression too, or is it just me? I mean, yes. And I remember us talking about that, like not you and me specifically, but at the comic shop. Like I remember us talking about this, that he sounded like Spider-Man. I said, I know this run was very guest star heavy. The Teen Titans and various Justice League members were around almost every issue. Is there a favorite character? Is there a favorite or character you like seeing during the run? Are there any characters you thought didn't really work in the story? I didn't feel like it was so guest star heavy or not.
No,
like,
me neither. No.
You know, I mean, well, you know, Wonder Woman got a fair amount of play. Connor, the Teen Titans, that was relatively brief.
I thought he really nailed the characterization of Wonder Woman in his Justice League story. I really, really enjoyed her issue. I feel like you don't normally see her very vulnerable. He nailed it.
And Brian's last point, he said, since you mentioned it and I had no idea, do you know why Chuck Austen was fired? So we've already talked about that. He said, some of the characterizations and plot points didn't land with me, but I wouldn't wish someone a job loss. I mean, I agree with that too. Yeah. I don't think in a situation like this, really anybody wins. And it's interesting, as we've said now multiple times, I do think J.D. Finn did a good job landing the plane that someone else took off. But at the same time, and this might sound surprising to you or to people, but it's funny because Austen did talk in that interview about like what his original script was. Mm-hmm. Like, I would love to read the original script. Like, I actually would be curious to know what the ending was supposed to be. So yeah, I'm never a fan of that. Even if I don't like it, it's like, I would have preferred to have him finish it off. Yeah. But then Lorenzo, after he read the run, right? So we had this whole exchange, like, why do you like Lana so much? He tells me this thing. I'm like, have you read this? And then he, like a few hours later, he had read it. He said, he talked about the Spider-Man banter and all that, but he said, it wasn't until Lana showed up that Austen's writing made me cry. When Superman is injured at the end of 818 and Wonder Woman is discussing who will handle his care, the final page is Lana walking into the room and stating that it is she who has always cared for him. I was moved to tears by the sentiment, feeling immediately in that moment that Austen did indeed see Clark and Lana's relationship similarly to how I do. This leads to issue 819, which features another moment that brought tears to my eyes. Lana is talking to Clark and states that she loves him, at which point Clark interjects that Lana must have meant loved, past tense. But Lana responds with such conviction, I said what I meant. I really felt the weight of her words there. Lana does go on to say something that elicited quite the chuckle from me when she emphasizes that she doesn't dislike Lois. Let's just say I can relate. Love triangles are a trope that I just eat up. And so I did find the tension pretty compelling when Austen later gets Lana and Lois in the same room together for the holidays. I will say though, like taking a break from his comment there, even though I didn't like the triangle, I do wish that we had gotten to see an actual conversation between Lana and Lois. Yeah. Right? Like, what would that, they end up sitting silently in that living room when everyone else scatters, but like what I would have been interesting.
Yeah. I mean, they're intelligent. They're emotionally well-developed. They got wealth of history. They got a really significant thing in common. Again, would they come out of this as friends? There's to bring it across the street, currently Mary Jane Watson and the Black Cat are friends because the one thing they have in common is they both dated Spider-Man for a while. So now they like hang out and go on adventures together. Maybe we missed out on that.
Maybe. Well, watch Superman and Lois, man. You get...
I have nothing bad to say about Superman. Not a single bad thing to say about Superman and Lois.
And Lorenzo's final point is, I think my only major complaint about Austen's run is actually that it was cut short. I don't know how far he would have gone with Clark and Lana's relationship had this run continued longer. But I'd like to think he would have stood by Lana's words as a writer and had Clark realize she is the one. I need Clark and Lana to get the treatment that Tom King gave to Bruce and Selina in his Batman run. And while Austen's action run laid down a super encouraging and beautiful foundation for that, the potential was never fully realized.
Yeah.
So he would have wanted to see this play out all the way through.
That's beautiful sentiment. I'm really happy it landed. I'm really happy you were able to bring that into his life.
Yeah, not to pat myself on the back, but no, I'm glad for someone who loves Klana that much. This is the run.
I mean, it makes sense. I didn't even know about it until we started sitting down and doing this. So again, it's gonna come out. It's good. The solicits are gonna come out in a couple months. It's gonna be there. It's gonna be Superman by Chuck Austen. Find out what all the hype's about. It's gonna sell 500,000 copies, and you're never gonna get the next Omni you want.
I know. Or maybe they'll pull a blurb from you in this episode and put it on the back cover.
I've had my blurbs on comics before. This is one I would stand behind.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now the last thing, Chuck Austen's final DC work was the 6-issue arc on JLA called Pain of the Gods that ran from 101 through 106 in 2004. So right in the same time period. Yeah. This was the point in time after Joe Kelly's run had ended and then JLA had shifted to these arcs, these rotating arcs of different creative teams. So Austen and Ron Garney did this 6-part storyline, Pain of the Gods, where each issue a different member of the League is faced with a loss that they're unable to prevent. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but the first one, we lead off with Superman, and there's this fire, and there's this new superhero who shows up, who tries to help, and he's holding up the part of the building. Yeah. But it turns out he's overestimated his capabilities, and he's unable to hold it up, and he perishes in this fire. And so Superman deals with the loss of that. And it's very similar throughout the rest of it. And one kind of ongoing thread is that Superman continues to check in on the son of this superhero who died. And we learn more about the family. And it turns out they all got powers at the same time and all of that. I found this one pretty innocuous. Like, I thought the idea of it was cool. This was another one, not a ton of text here. I mean, this really just kind of flew by, really leaned on the art. It was fine. Like, I didn't have that strong a reaction to it, but I thought the idea that it was exploring about these personal losses and how the League is there for each other, it's solid. But I know you seem to really like it.
Yeah, I did. Cause again, it goes back to this like emotional pain. Like the Jon Stewart issue was really good, where he hears two people screaming, and the one he chooses to stop means the other one is murdered, and in a very like violent, unsettling way. And it sticks with him, and it brings up past trauma of the time, a planet died under his watch and everything else. And they're all sitting around the table on the moon, like the gods they are. And they're all realizing like, oh, only the people in this room understand what we've gone through. We have to talk about this. And, again, one of my favorite movies recently was Marvel's Thunderbolts, where the third act is very similar to this. It's like, we can't punch our way out of this. We have to like figure out how to deal with each other and rely on each other. And, this was 20 years ago, and I thought it was great. When John is sitting there, like, he's being a dick to everyone. Eventually, Clark just keeps asking him, do you need someone to talk to? And then when the tables are turned, John's like, I am here to listen. And again, it goes back to that Jimmy thing, where it's like, everyone needs someone to talk to, especially the guys who can hear voices all over the world. And my favorite Martian Manhunter, I thought that issue was great too, because again, he lays it all out there. He's like, I've lost more than all of you combined, and I can remember every second of it. And I can't relate to you people. You've never gone through this. And of course he realizes, well, he can. There's a reason he protects this world, even though it's an adopted world. So 6 issues, they'll never be referenced again. They don't lead into Infinite Crisis or anything like that, but they're great, and I enjoyed reading them, and I'll probably revisit that more than anything else.
Fair. I did like that at the end of the story, the League has prevented the widow and her kids from taking revenge on the person who was ultimately responsible for that fire, right? But at the end, Superman has this moment with the son, with the kid, and I think in a lesser story, the kid would have said like, "Oh, thank you, Superman," or whatever. But the kid is still very angry that Superman was unable to save his dad. And I felt like that was a real moment to end on, and I appreciated that.
Do you think I had this thought, because I did not realize that the character that Gog was a pre-existing character, because I have not read as much of Our Worlds at War as you have. Did you think that was maybe a backdoor? Like, hey, if I've got further plans for Gog and I need a very angry child, and I can't necessarily use that kid because someone else has other plans for him, or I need to connect it back to else. Like, it almost, they seem to be similar stories enough where maybe you could connect it back.
Interesting.
I mean? Yeah. Because I was just surprised. I was like, wait, two angry children that are mad at you for not saving their... I was like, that's strange. And then I started thinking about it. I was like, oh, well, wait a second. Maybe this is a way of, if oh, that's done. Okay, that's great. We've carved off that timeline. That branch of hyper time is gone. But now this kid one day is going to find the golden armor and become Magog or something like that.
Right. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I like to think we did his bibliography justice.
Oh.
I mean, you certainly spoke up for it.
I mean, listen, I've been having this conversation for a very long time. And again, there's rough patches. There really is. But at the same time, it's like, when you can't stop thinking about a work, when you have to engage it. To this day, I constantly get recommendations of like, why was that X-Men run so terrible? And it's like, you're still talking about it. There have been worse comics since then, but you don't remember because it didn't make you angry. It just, you forgot about it as soon as you put it down. And the same thing is here. Like, this is awesome because I'm getting your perspective as someone who loved all that other stuff, and to find out why people are so angry. It's like, oh yeah, this was wildly different than everything else. But I'm looking at it now and I'm gaining the context of, oh, this guy did exactly what I did, which was go back to the Golden Age, find out why the character was so popular and try to reintroduce drama and conflict and everything else that had worked so well across the street with Spider-Man. So I'm sitting here like, yeah, I again, if you put out the collected edition, whether or not our names are on the back, I will be ordering one from my local comic book shop.
Fair enough. And just to kind of wind this down, like I've been saying, I think there were some interesting ideas. It was just the execution. And I do think in a vacuum, if you really just kind of go in with that golden age mindset, it can work better. Yeah. But in the context of this version of the character at that point in time, again, for me, it just didn't. But certainly the Metropolis maxi series, I do stand by that for whatever that's worth. Yeah. And, you know, we've mentioned the editor a bunch, especially in all those quotes and everything. Not for anything. I ultimately lay a lot of the blame for this at his feet. Because you're the editor, like you're the one who's selecting the talent, giving him the freedom to do this. Yeah. I know this is a problematic person, but
it's separate. It's so funny. You
know, I'm not saying this is not the worst thing he's done, but there is something to be said for that. Like you are, and I know a lot of times, like we think of editorial and it's like, oh, they're going to interfere or say no, but it's like at the same time, right? Like they are the custodians of these characters and they're setting the tone and coordinating a line.
But this was like, This was the industry. DiDio over here, Jemis and Quesada across the street, like Marvel and all this garbage. And it was just like, what's gonna get people talking about this stuff? Like I really do feel that's why he was given all these top tier books and Marvel, because it's like people are talking about and it's not until someone like me downstairs with a spreadsheet says, nope, you've fallen below X threshold, you're off the book.
Right.
And then, you know, Berganza was probably the same way. Berganza was like, oh man, that guy was writing on X-Men and Avengers. Yeah, come on over. I want to do crazy things. Great. You know, he probably thought he had the next Mark Miller sitting there.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Mark Miller did all this, except they called it Ultimate X-Men instead of normal X-Men. And it sold 100,000 copies every month.
Right. Well, yeah, no, I agree. I think recognizing the context of the time, I'm sure that there was that, but maybe then they needed their version of Ultimate. Because I think, and that's where it feels irresponsible to me, because this really, I mean, look, For Tomorrow, which I am a fan of, that was doing its own thing, but it didn't feel as out there as this did in terms of kind of lining up and being consistent in terms of voice and characterization.
Is that Brian Azzarello?
Yeah.
I want to add two more writers to the people. I like Chuck Austen more than, you mentioned Tom King. I like Chuck Austen more than I like Tom King.
I mean, I'm no big Tom King fan. I still like him better than Austen, but you're not going to get much of an argument here.
And I will add Brian Azzarello. I like Chuck Austen more than I like Brian Azzarello.
All right.
Yeah. I am really interested though as to what your commenter said. If there are female fans listening to this, I want their perspective, because this is weird. And you and I are both guys, and I would love a different perspective on that, because that's a conversation I've never had, and I would love to.
Yeah, please reach out. We'd be very curious. Well, we've gone over 2 hours, but really, thank you so much. And I'm glad there were points, you know, you pushed, and that's good. And I'm glad we unpacked this the way that we did. And yeah, really, this is one, and I'm always curious to hear what audience members think, but yeah, I'd be especially curious whether you've read the work before or not. Yeah. Like, let us know what you think. Yeah. And you might get more people coming out in support of this than you might have thought.
And if nothing else, I wanted to mention this before, but most of the action run has covers by the legendary Art Adams. So if you are a fan of his and you don't want to read it, just look them up. Just Google them. They are great. They are, you know, classic artists, great layouts, great design work. Like, they're really captivating covers, even if you don't flip through the issue itself. Art did none of the internal artwork.
All right. The works of Chuck Austen. I don't expect to ever talk about them again, but we did it. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Anthony.
All right, audience, thank you as always. I hope you enjoyed this. Make sure you keep tuning in. And until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. Support the show and receive exclusive content, including the spin-off podcast Beyond Metropolis, advanced listens, and more by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Subscribe, rate, and review today via your platform of choice, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. Links are in the show notes. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman, now covering the color era of the classic George Reeves series. Subscribe today.